Liking that haircut, Mr. Jackson.
There are too many gray hairs staring back at me in the mirror.
You
And I
and me
thought,
both.
you know what? It's time to go back. Low maintenance. The only problem I have, Wade, is I forgot to wear a hat this past weekend. So
Yeah, sunscreen every day.
every day.
Every day.
So it's snowing in my office if you get my gist.
All right, Madam President, whenever you are ready.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. And at this time, I'd like to call this meeting to order. At this time, if you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the
The
flag
flag of the United States
United
of
States
America,
of America, and to
and
the
to the
republic
republic for
for
which
which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
visible,
with
with
liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Thank you. All right, at this time, Tia, if you would please take roll.
Pam Sloan,
Here,
Colin Stoller, Linda Cavazos, Greg Malkovich, Jay Kenny,
Here.
Colin McNaught,
Here.
Christina Brockett,
Here.
Wade Polson,
Present.
Deanna Riddle,
Present.
Rayanne Swanson,
Here.
Alex Woodley,
Here.
Keith Whipperman,
Here.
Dennis Holmes,
Here.
David Vick, trying to get in, Sean Fitzsimons,
Here.
JP Odegaard,
Present.
Tammy Hayvick,
Here.
Bob Levitt,
Here.
Domingo Rivera, Dave Henneman,
Here.
Ellen Townsend,
Here.
Xavier Anthiam,
Here.
Alex Munoz, Dexter Wallace, Nala Williams, Timothy Jackson,
Present.
Paul Anderson,
Here.
Bart Davis,
Here.
Kate Segura,
Here.
and myself, Tia Wonder.
thank you, Tia.
Mr. Malkovich joined the meeting. I see him on the screen now.
Thank you. At this time, we will go to page number 4, announcements. Mr. Jackson.
There is no one else here in the office except Mr. Anderson and I, but we have no announcements from our office.
Thank you. All right, now we'll go to page 5 for public comment. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the board about any matter not on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law has been complied with. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person please complete a yellow public comment card and submit to the president before the opening of the item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of the particular group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the board as a whole. Comments that are determined to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. There is nobody here in this office, in my current office, for public comment. Mr. Jackson, anyone in your office?
There is no one in the office, but please note Mr. Stallworth has joined the meeting.
Thank you. Tia, public comment?
Well, I'm currently sitting at the Palace Station right now where we have our normal meetings. I don't have anyone here.
Okay, so it's correct to say at this time we have no public comment, correct?
That's related to anything other than an agenda item, that is correct.
Okay, so we will go forward with item number 6. Item number 6 is the approval of the agenda for November 13th. This is for action. I need
Wade
a,
Polson, I move to approve the agenda.
thank you. We have a first. I'm seeking
Tina
a
Brittle, I
second.
second.
Thank you, Deanna. We have a first and second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you. We will go to item number 7. Item number 7 is on page 10, the approval of the realignment committee's appointments. For possible action, Tim Jackson, Executive Director, will present Domingo Rivera, Bishop Gorman High School, and Isabella Sanchez, Secta High School, as voting members of the realignment committee, filling vacated positions. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Ms. Sloan. Domingo Rivera has served as the liaison from the private schools, so moving him into this continues the practice of having people with the experience that we were looking for to continue serving in that. He is replacing Mr. Marcusis, who had to recuse himself from the committee. And then Isabel Sanchez is from Secta High School. She represents the principal group for Southern Nevada. And we brought her in as she has a unique experience as also being an athletic administrator herself and having a school that has the unique dynamic of being a vocational school that has differing sports, and they bring a wealth of knowledge in both positions. She will be replacing Mr. Cole, who recused himself from the committee as well.
President Sloan,
Yes, sir.
just question, I guess maybe for Mr. Anderson as well. Just because names are agendized here, is there an opportunity for additional names to be put forward in a motion to be appointed instead of what's on here? Or is this just a yes or no on this list?
Oh, on this list.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear him.
Was that just yes or no on this list?
Yes, it's yes or no on this list.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. So just I have concerns about not having a high school principal represented who has all the sports. So I do have some concerns about the having the sector principal be the only high school principal and the representative from the South for high school principals. So I'm not in support of that. And so I just want to make sure to say that. I'll let some of the other committee members speak as well, but I am in opposition to that. I would prefer to see a comprehensive high school principal who has all of the sports represented.
And Pam or Tim, this is Keith from Centennial. Just a thought on Domingo's great guy, obviously has the knowledge, but with some of the challenges that come up with private schools and some of the challenges with Gorman, I'm not sure that that's the best selection for that spot. Just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay, so right now we have 2 individuals that are seeking positions that the NIAA has brought forth for the realignment. Mr. Jackson, is there any comment in regards to things that have been shared?
One is I would like to have representation on this committee that represents all of the schools in Southern Nevada and Northern Nevada as well. Having a large school private member is important. Also, we are not only comprehensive high schools in our divisions, we are magnet schools, we are tech schools, and that's why we believe Isabel is the best selection for that. She brings that unique experience. Not having a sport is not a requirement. It also is indicative of the fact that we need to get a wide array of opinions on our realignment committees. We have assistant principals, we have principals, we have athletic directors. And I think that's important that we do not have just single representation of a single area of a single demographic of comprehensive high school public. We need to have comprehensive high school public, private, charter full slate of sports, partial slate of sports, all sports represented equitably.
Hey, Tim, for me, just because I'm new to this, can you list who's actually on that? Maybe that would help me if I knew who else was on the realignment and I'm new to this, so I don't exactly know who's on that committee.
I'm going to turn this to Bart. Bart, do you have that at hand? I got to go grab the folder off a shelf.
Tim, I can read it off if you want. I have it.
Thanks, Kate.
Yep. We have Brooke Formaster, so she's 1A South, Josh Katz, 1A South, Miles Baldwin, 1A North, David Vick, 1A North, Sean Fitzsimons, 2A South, Ken Parker, 2A South, Mike Brooks, 2A North, Sarah Scott, 2A North, Phil Tao, 3A South, Dallas Larson, 3A South, Jason Odegaard, 3A South, Rob Cottrell, 3A North, Wade Pearson, 3A North, Paul Sullivan, 3A North. And then obviously we have Domingo potentially 4A, 5A South, Tammy Habig, 4A, 5A South, potentially Isabel Sanchez, 4A, 5A South, Tony Polzine, 4A, 5A South, Art Anderson, 4A, 5A North, Darvel Bell, 4A, 5A North, Freeman Holbrook, 4A, 5A North, Chris Magram, 4A, 5A North. And then we have non-voting members, Mike Kofer, Bob Levitt, and then our staff.
Thank you, Kate.
I would also like to make it known that this committee only makes recommendations. They do not vote on the final approval. That is a board item. But as you can hear from the committee that Kate read off, thank you, Kate, for having that at hand. It is a wide breadth across many different areas of our state.
I would like to add, if I could, that I don't believe that a principal from Washoe County is on the committee as well.
That's correct, Rollins. Thank you.
So I would also say that going forward, we need these 2 vacant seats filled, correct, Mr. Jackson? So how would, we only have 2 options at this time, and maybe it's a conversation we need to have with Paul. Do we have a motion going forward? Because this is for possible action.
Yeah, this is Wade Polson. I'll move to approve Domingo Rivera and Isabella Sanchez for the realignment committee.
I will second it.
I'm sorry, who seconded it?
It's Greg Malkovich.
Thank you, Greg.
Ms. Sloan, just from a further discussion before a vote, or is that allowed?
Yes. We have
Okay.
a first, we have a second. Now I'd like to open the floor for further discussion.
Yeah, I think, Tim, I understand your point about, and it has nothing to do with Isabel as a person. I think she's great. I think she's fantastic. I am concerned with the voice of high school principals from the South being a school that does not have specifically football represented. Football is always the problem in realignment, or the challenge, right? And so I think it's difficult when there are what we're essentially saying is the voice of high school principals in the South being someone who's not doesn't really have a part of that football conversation. So I hear you for sure that like representation should be across, but I think speaking collectively from a high school principal standpoint in the South, we would prefer representation being someone who has all of the sports. And so, like I said, I think I'm speaking for a large majority, if not all, of high school principals in the South in saying that we are in opposition to that.
Okay, any further comment, discussion?
Pam, do you need us to put another name forward? Is that what you were asking?
Well, I would have to seek guidance from
At
Paul
this point,
Anderson.
Ms. Sloan, you cannot. It's
No,
Yeah,
Okay.
This is
that's what you
agendized
had said, Pam.
for
That's
these
why I was
2
confirming.
members.
Okay, thank you.
yeah. So any further discussions, questions? I believe at this time, we should probably take a roll call vote. So Tia, if you would, please.
Pam Slum,
I'm gonna say yay.
Okay. Rollins Allworth. Rollins,
Yay, sorry about that.
Linda Cavazos, has she joined us?
Yay.
Greg Malkovich,
Yay.
Jay Kenny,
Yes.
Colin McNaught,
Nay.
Christina Brockett,
Nay.
Wade Polson,
Aye.
Deanna Riddle,
Nay.
Brianne Sorensen,
Aye.
Alex Woodley.
Yay.
I'm sorry, was that a yay or nay?
Yeah.
Keith Whipperman.
Nay.
So the yeas have it. I have 4 dissenting.
Thank you. So the ayes have it. All right, now let's go to item number 8. The approval of the 25-28 realignment for football only. Mr. Jackson, Executive Director, will present and explain the proposed realignment for the football only approved by the realignment committee. That information begins on page 12.
Ms. Sloan?
Yes,
I'm
sir.
going to ask Mr. Anderson if we are able to be flexible, even though the motion did not say flexible for the agenda.
You are correct.
Are we able to be flexible?
You need to make a motion. You can go back to that item and make a motion.
We need Mr. Polson to go back and be amend his motion for the flexible agenda. I would like to get number 9 out of the way before we deal with realignment, if possible.
Wade Polson, I moved for a flexible agenda.
Deanna Riddle, I second.
Second.
Thank you. We have a first and a second on amending and for a flexible agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Sorry about that. That should have
Thank
been
you.
brought. Proceed. So being that said, you would like to go to item number 9, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Jackson, okay.
I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Segroy. She is going to present the one-time transfer approval language that we will be sending back to the LCB.
Okay, hang on, let's get to that page.
Looking at page 34, it starts on.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Kate, go ahead.
Actually moving down to 35. So what you're gonna see here in blue is everything that the LCB sent back to us, based on what we sent to them. In red are things that we've adjusted since, and then in green are things that the Rules, Regulations, and Policies Committee has changed, so that it aligns better with what we originally sent them. A lot of this language came back a bit different than we had originally sent, and some of the intent has changed as well. So I just want to be clear in that we're not changing anything we originally approved. We're just rewording it to match more what the Board of Control had approved and sent to the LCB. That being said, section 2 here, this is the new one-time transfer rule that we sent them. The language is vastly similar to what we had sent. The only big difference here is they did include a little bit about how to apply for the one-time transfer, and they use the term on a form. There's other regulations where we have updated that language since there's no actual form, and that's a bit confusing for parents because they think they have to actually fill out a piece of paper. So we just wanted to update that to match language in other regulations that say through a process. That way, regardless of how we do registrations, it's kind of consistent in that whatever that process that the association has approved at that time. Obviously, right now that's Activate. So outside of that, section 2 reads as we would like it. The intent is there for a one-time transfer. Before we kind of move through all of this, Paul, are we going one by one through each regulation to have a motion or as a collective?
I think what you ought to do is go through the whole reg and then just have a vote. If somebody wants to amend one particular item, we can deal with it then. But this is one regulation and should be voted on that way, I think.
Okay. So we'll just go through each of them or all of them together.
Yes.
Just a question on this part of it here. Does this part in blue talks about being ineligible, correct? Am I missing somewhere where this is the one-time transfer part of it? I thought that was a little bit later on.
No, this is the one-time transfer that basically says that you can be granted a waiver. So if you enroll so people that enrolls in the school for the first time or transferred from one school to another may apply for the waiver of ineligibility. So 716, which is referenced in subsection 1, that's our transfer rule that says if you transfer, you're ineligible, yada, yada, has all the specifics there. This is saying you may apply for a waiver for that ineligibility so that you are no longer ineligible.
Okay, but the parameters of the waiver are not yet outlined in this part. That's coming.
That's really it. There is no parameters. They just have to apply through our process, which is going through Activate. And the association will approve it as long as it complies with all other policies and you haven't received a waiver previously. So there really are no stipulations to it. It just is a waiver from the ineligibility. And that's really it.
Okay, I'm gonna hold my question because I think maybe as we continue, it'll be clearer. I'm just a little confused by that, but keep going. I'm sorry.
Sure. Okay. Okay, so moving down, so that's really the only change here from what they sent back to us for the one-time transfer regulation. Moving to section 3, this is a new regulation as well. We are just moving language from our previous transfer regulation that specifically talked about if a student follows a coach or had instruction from a coach prior to transferring. Our intent and what we had approved at the Board of Control was that this section of the transfer rule would be moved to our recruiting regulations and doesn't have anything to do with actual transfer rules outside of if you are being quote unquote recruited or following a coach or anything along these lines. It's going to cause that student to be ineligible, but we want that separated from our transfer rules. So that's really the only change we had here. This language has always been in our regulations. This was not new language. So the one issue, if you look down at 2 and 3, was that the LCB kept in some of the transfer language, but our purpose here was to separate this. So this transfer language in 2 and 3 is still going to exist in some way in our transfer rule, which is 716. We have just separated it out. So my note at the bottom there is this section 3 will just be a new regulation that's separate from transfer rules with our recruiting regulations in the 300 section. So that's the only difference here, is just removing the language about the transfers and moving this specific regulation in with recruiting. Any questions on that one before we move to the next?
Hey, just for clarification, all this language has been approved by the board already. We just had to make sure that the LCB has the correct language that we use. This is not new. This is just amending what was previously approved, that the LCB used their terms. We're putting our terms back in there.
Absolutely. This was all already approved, sent to them for their approval. They've tweaked the language. We're tweaking it back essentially to make it fit more with what we want. Okay, moving on to 4. This is regulation 716. So I don't know, Colin, if this will answer your question, but some of our regulations about zoning and your living situation, your guardianship situation, most of them are outlined in 712. Those all still exist. So our one-time transfer does not override all of our guardianship and residency regulations that we have. You can't use the one-time transfer to get over your ineligibility of your living situation or your guardianship, as those are not directly related to just your transfer. It has to be a transfer based on our regulations. And that's outlined in the one-time transfer. It says it has to still follow all other rules and regulations. So basically the only change here that the LCB made, and we're not really making any change to this, was the term residential affidavit. They just switched the way that was worded, which is fine. There's no change in its meaning there. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, and this we'll clean up the lining as a little, it didn't line up perfectly, but 5, if you see where 5 is in the middle of that sentence there. The other thing that they added, which was something we asked them to do, was adding all the different types of schools. So this basically was just saying, if you enroll in 9th grade at a private charter magnet or technical school, as long as you follow all the other regulations, you will be eligible at that school when you initially begin 9th grade. So that language was exactly what we sent them. And then if you scroll a bit further, 8 is the only new thing here that they added, we had asked them to define residential affidavit in our definition section, but they added it here at this regulation, which is fine. Reason being, we don't use the term residential affidavit in any other regulation. So there was really no need for it to be its standalone definition. They just outlined a new section that explained what a residential affidavit was. The issue with the way that they worded this was they actually basically defined what a temporary guardianship is, and that's not what a residential affidavit is. It is simply a student and their parent or legal guardian living with other adults in another home. And so we worked with the Rules and Regulations Policy Committee to kind of reword that to make sense a bit more with what we need it to say. So we took out resides with a person who is not the parent, because that's not accurate. And we added that the pupil and his or her parents reside within the home of another adult. So it's just rewording it to make sense as to what that definition is based on that type of living situation. Any questions on that before we move on to?
Hey, Kate, can you go back to number 5? When it talks about zone of attendance for a technical school, charter school, private school, what is their zone of attendance?
So it's going to be the state of Nevada. So they could live anywhere and attend a private charter magnet technical. So they don't technically have a zone in the sense of like a centennial zone. So they have to live in the state.
Got it. So for one-time transfer purposes, they can one-time transfer anyone in the entire state as that's their zone of attendance.
So this is separate. This is basically saying when you enroll in 9th grade, you can attend anywhere, and that does not count as your one-time transfer outside of, and we'll get to that, if you are in an out-of-zone waiver. So your zone variance, traditional zone variance, COSAs for CCSD, those are excluded from this regulation. This is basically, in a sense, our first entry rule that we don't really have, but we do. This is saying that, if you enroll in 9th grade, you're not using a transfer. You get to enroll and have full eligibility at a private charter magnet or technical school without using your one-time transfer. From there, if you then transfer after enrolling for the first time in 9th grade, you would use your one-time transfer to do any other move. Does that make sense?
But again, their zone, even for that one-time transfer, their zone of attendance is the entirety of the state.
Right. Yeah. So if you're then thinking, let's go from a charter, then transfer to a private, they're still within their zone. They're doing their one-time transfer, though. They're still using that because they're transferring from one school to another.
Okay. Thank you, Kate.
Yep. Anything else? Okay. Section 5 is 716. 716 is our transfer rule. We had approved at the Board of Control that we are moving forward with a transfer rule that said you transfer from one school to another, you are ineligible in any sport your name appeared on a roster, any level, during the previous 180 school days, the previous year. Okay, so this is called a roster exception rule. This is what we had agreed on. We had sent forward. The language came back and it did not say that. There was a lot of miscommunication, I think, with this rule, the previous rule that we just talked about, where we moved some of the transfer language out. They were conflicting. So we basically took out much of the language that they originally had in there because the intent was not there. And we are sending it back more clearly as to how we originally had sent it to them. Our current transfer rule is you transfer, you're out 180 school days, doesn't talk about in any sport that you rostered in, doesn't talk about in any sport in the past 180 school days. So this is a new rule. We approved this. We want to give more flexibility with what sports students can participate in, as well as we don't really care if you participated, your freshman year, if you're transferring your senior year and you never played that sport again, and now you want to play it in your senior year. You haven't played it in a year. So that's what we all agreed on. We're just rewording that to make it state that. So obviously you can read where the green is. That's how we're rewording it. Some of the blue is what they originally had put in there. And then the red is what we are getting rid of that was not aligned with what our intent was. So that's what that first sentence is. The second sentence here is basically just saying that you can also apply for your waiver. So here's our eligibility rule for transferring. You're ineligible if you transfer. Here are the stipulations. If you haven't yet already, you can apply for that waiver pursuant to our one-time transfer rule if you have not previously used it. And then the other way that you can rebut your ineligibility is through filing an appeal. So you can appeal through a hardship for whatever that reason is for transferring. So you may be able to get eligibility through filing a hardship based on the situation. Any questions on that? There's quite a bit of change there, so definitely want to give you a second to kind of look through that and make sure it makes sense. Okay, if there's no questions, we're going to move just slightly down right there. If you stop on the top of page 40, section 6, the LCB came back keeping this regulation. This regulation basically has a bit about transferring in it. This regulation was used with our same zone of attendance transfers. So like if you're transferring from a private to a public, public to charter, charter to public, any of those transfers, we use this regulation that basically gave you the roster exception that said you can't participate in anything you rostered in. We don't need that anymore because that is our transfer rule for all transfers now. So we had asked to remove that. The LCB came back with the language still there. But the language also didn't match what our intent for the one-time transfer and the transfer regular transfer rule 716 was, where we are adding in that it's anything that you rostered in the past year, not forever. So again, there was some conflicting. We had two regulations that didn't, match. So we are asking again to remove that. There's also language in 720 that has to do with changes in the zone of attendance. So that's when like a school district rezones. We had moved that language. We didn't remove it. We had moved that into a separate regulation, 736, that already talks about rezoning. So this regulation didn't need to exist anymore because the transfer part of it was now incorporated into 716, our transfer rule, and the rezoning part was moved into the rezoning regulation. So this was really a cleanup. I'm not sure why the LCB sent it back still being in the regulations, because again, it does conflict with what changes we have made. So that'll be a conversation Paul and I will have with them, but we are asking to remove it once again. So that's all that this is just striking the language there. And then I just put that note there that again, subsections 2 and 3 are going to be moved to 736. That's our other rezoning regulation. The next is section 728. This was already removed in a previous approval through the LCB that came back. Board approved, everything was done with this. So I don't know if this was just an error oversight, but this regulation popped back up. This is just an option zone school regulation that has to do with like open enrollment. We don't have that anywhere in the state. So this regulation was removed. It has not been used in several years. So this was just sending it back. If you look on the top of page 42, with my note, it just says this section was already removed in a previous LCB document. So that's all that was, is just to remind them that we've already gotten rid of that regulation. Section 8, 734, this came back exactly as we had sent them. There are no issues here. It was just removing a section about students withdrawing from homeschool and what their eligibility is. This is going to be taken care of with our transfer rule and our one-time transfer rule. There's no need to have additional language in here about homeschool transfers, because that would give them almost like a leg up on every other student if they had an additional way to transfer. So this was just to level the playing field with all types of transfers. We'd already approved that, sent it, all is good there. So you can go ahead and scroll down to 43. So section 9 is regulation 736. And this regulation is our rezoning regulation. Essentially what it's saying is if your school district gets rezoned, your school is rezoned, you are able to essentially transfer to that school you're zoned to without having to use your one-time transfer, or you don't have a penalty on having to change schools due to rezoning, is what this is. And we've already approved this. It was sent back as is, which is fine, but it did not include that language from 720 that we had asked to be moved over. So that's all this is just, again, asking them to move over the two sections that come from 720 that also are related to rezoning. No language changes, just restructuring where some of the language is located. All right, moving on to section 10. So this one there are some changes in this, not too many. They did a good job. 744, this regulation is about out of zone waivers. So this is our zone variances and COSAs and CCSD out of zone waivers. It's called in different districts, but essentially this regulation will stay in place. If you are attending a school outside of your zone of attendance on a waiver, you're only provided sub-varsity eligibility for that first 180 school days. And it, again, just a little language change on a form. We changed that to through a process. That just has to do with how they can apply for their waiver to get their sub-varsity eligibility. And then the other piece to this is that, just so that everyone's clear on it, if you are going out of zone, you can use, if you have not already, your one-time transfer to get your full eligibility versus just your sub-varsity eligibility. So that will put those type of enrollments on a similar level to your privates, your charters, your magnets, and technical schools. And that's really it for that one. There's not much change. And that's it. Those are all the regulations. So the big ones, again, are the one-time transfer language, the transfer rule 716 language, and the rest were mostly just kind of a little bit of language here and there and moving some sections around, but those two had the biggest changes. So opening up for any questions anybody has for me.
Yeah, Kate, this is Wade Polson. Just to be clear, the one-time waiver does not need to be applied for if you're living in Alamo, Nevada, and your parents moved to Elko, and so you go up there and play in the same sport. The waiver does not need to be applied, right? Because the parents moved and you're just moving.
Yep. So we have a regulation that basically just says, they're not included here. We haven't made any changes in this section to them, but we do have two regulations that relate to physical moves, residential moves. Those do not fall within a one-time transfer. A physical move is an exception basically to our transfer rule because you're able to prove that you have physically moved from one zone to the other. So as long as all paperwork is good, a physical move would not require a one-time transfer.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, I think to Whipperman's point, just a question on the zone of attendance layer of this, right? So what I am understanding is that if the one-time transfer applies to a change in your zone of attendance. So for example, Cimarron to Cheyenne, right? That is a one-time transfer, correct?
It depends on what you're talking about. Are we talking about a move or are we talking about an out of zone waiver?
Okay, so yeah, not the physical move, right? But the out of zone waiver, whatever, right? Kid coasts from X school to my school.
Yep.
In their sophomore year. That is a one-time transfer, right?
They can, they would be using their one-time transfer to get their full eligibility if they haven't already used it. If they have, then they would get just sub-varsity for that transfer.
So they have to change their zone of attendance, is the way I understand that. So I guess my further question here is, or am I misunderstanding that, Kate? Sorry, you made me kind of a face.
So they're not changing their zone of attendance. They're going out of zone. So that would be a circumstance where you're getting a waiver of your zone of attendance.
Right. Okay. So the green part on page, sorry, I just lost that page. Page 44 is if the school changes their zone, rezoning. That's what
that's rezone. Yeah, that's strictly in that regulation has been in existence for a very long time. It's just rezoning.
It's green, so just written a little differently. Okay.
Moved.
Okay. So then, what about how does this apply to a kid who leaves Cimarron and goes to a charter school? How does the one-time transfer apply? Just to be clear.
So our transfer rule is if they go from Cimarron to a charter school, they are ineligible in any sport they rostered in the past 180 school days. So if they did not participate in any sports, they don't have to use their one-time transfer because they didn't, they're not ineligible. But if they played basketball, now they want to play basketball, they want full eligibility, they're using their one-time transfer.
Oh, so they do have the ability to utilize the one-time transfer to go from Cimarron Memorial to a charter school.
Correct.
Okay. And I think know better, do better is my opinion. I understand that this has been moved through, and I understand that we have voted on this in the past, right? I think my challenge here is that I understand that zone of attendance to have not changed in that scenario from Cimarron Memorial High School to a charter school. I don't believe your zone of attendance has changed. So therefore, I don't necessarily think the one-time transfer should apply here. I'm just a little concerned about opening up that door more so, right? I kind of thought the spirit of this was more so to help support students who actually change their zone of attendance and move from X school to Y school because of whatever hardship, whatever reason, whatever happens. I'm not as comfortable opening up the door to say you can go to Cimarron Memorial High School as a freshman, sophomore, and a junior, and then when you're a rock star senior, you can then take a one-time transfer to a charter school or a private school or something to that effect. I'm very uncomfortable with that direction. Do I understand that correct, Kate? Could that scenario play out with this?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so I think that is something that's very concerning to me. I think it kind of opens a door that I'm not excited to go through. I understand there are some factors here that are kind of pushing us in this direction for sure. Right, and so I recognize that. I would prefer to see some language in here that clarifies that and does not permit that kind of a scenario. I, however, may be in the minority. I don't believe I'm in the minority speaking from Clark County School District high school principals, but I may be in the minority of this group on that opinion. But just wanted to make sure that I was clear that we could have, this allows for scenarios where a student can be a varsity football player, for example, at my school, freshman, sophomore, junior year, and then his senior year, he could transfer to X charter school and also play on varsity that year. Is that correct?
You are correct.
Okay, and I am in opposition to that plan. So just wanted to make sure to express that. Thank you.
Dave Henneman, charter liaison. Colin, in response to that, as a charter schools, we're actually worried about that same incident happening, but coming from leaving the charter schools, going to a district school. And I just want to let you know, like many of the charter schools here, not all of them, but many, we do not take incoming seniors. For one reason or another, we don't take incoming seniors. At my school, we don't even take incoming juniors or seniors. And even to even get into a school, a charter school, they have to put in for a lottery and get drawn in the lottery that way. So there's a lot of we have a lot of things in place in the charter schools already, which is tough for kids to come in. And so, we're not going to be pulling kids from other schools as seniors to come in and play for us or juniors. But I know, like talking with a lot of the coaches and ADs in the charter schools, we're worried about losing our kids that, they came to a charter school so they could play varsity right away. And they're playing, and all of a sudden they become like the superstar athlete that you said. And then all of a sudden their senior year, we're going to go to a different school. We're going to go to another, like a CCSD school or a private school where they can get in as a senior. So it goes both ways there.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. Thank you. Obviously, I'm coming from the CCSD side of it, right? So that would be my concern. I agree with you. I think it's also a concern going in the other direction. My opinion is that it would less likely happen in the scenario that you're proposing and more likely happen in the scenario I'm proposing. But I hear you and I appreciate your perspective. And yeah, it's a concern both ways for sure.
President Sloan, can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Okay, this is Paul Anderson, legal counsel. We approved all of this language and all of these concepts at the September meeting. The only thing that we're doing with this regulation today, which the board directed us to do, Kate did a fine job, I think. I've gone through this several times, was to insert the language that the board wanted so that this regulation read as we felt it should, and I believe it does now. The idea of a student being able to transfer from one school to another, regardless of whether it's public to private, private to public, public to charter, or vice versa, that was all discussed and all approved. And at the last legislative session, we had legislators that were interested in not only allowing a one-time transfer, but allowing an every year transfer or an anytime transfer. So, what we've done here is we've complied with what we believe will be coming from the legislature in February if we don't do it ourselves, and by having a one-time transfer rule that's reasonable. In terms of the transfer, it's not automatic. If there's a transfer between public schools, for instance, in Clark County, if the school that student's transferring to does not have seats, the student won't be able to transfer. So there can still be limitations placed on the transfer based upon where it happens to be, such as Mr. Henneman just indicated. If his charter school, they don't accept seniors, then you're not going to be able to transfer to that school. But the idea of a student being able to have a one-time free transfer has been decided and agreed upon by the board back in September. So that's all I have to say.
President Sloan.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Anderson, I appreciate that context. Thank you. I recall all of that. So thank you for reminding the rest of us on that. I led this by saying, when you know better, you do better, right? And so I believe that, like, I have more context now. And so I wanted to make sure to elevate the concern that I already mentioned. So I totally understand what you're saying. Yes, I mean, I believe it's in front of us now to continue that approval process, correct? So I think there is an opportunity to make modifications or rethink based on a reflection of, like, we know better, let's do better, right? Is my opinion, right? And I'm speaking from myself here. So I totally understand that this has happened in September, and I understand the context of the legislator and the feeling there, right? I just wanted to make sure to voice that I believe that this regulation will have a negative impact on schools like mine, right? And schools that are in Clark County School District that do not have the same ability to bring students in to our zone, because our zone is not the state of Nevada, right? Our zone is very specific. You have to live in the zone. You have to coast into the zone. For schools that have a larger zone of attendance for the whole state of Nevada, that process is significantly easier. And I believe that opening this door in the way that we are makes it even easier for those kinds of scenarios, right? And perhaps creates an even larger divide between what we're seeing competitively from traditional zone schools like my school and charter and private schools whose zones are much larger. So I totally understand what you're saying, and I appreciate the context of it. But like I said, wanted to elevate the fact that I feel as though now that I've understand this a lot more, right, I am in opposition to moving in the direction that we are, given what's written here and given what Kate explained and verified that my understanding is correct.
Then your opposition, as I understand it, would be to the one-time transfer rule generally, because that's what you're saying. So that's, as I say, that's been the mandate to the NIAA, and that's all this does. I don't think there's a public school in Nevada that's happy with this. I don't know that there's maybe any school because of the possibility that students can leave. But that was the mandate basically from the legislature, that we provide that opportunity to students, and that's what this rule does.
Could I add something, please, Ms. Sloan?
Yes, Rollins, go right ahead.
Colin, the other aspect that our backs are against the wall as an association, because one of the driving factors of this is that we didn't want to be told what to do. We wanted to take a proactive approach in terms of dealing with transfers. If we leave it to the state legislature, what you're fighting against in the approval of this is that we're providing every student in the state one chance to transfer. If we don't control that and the legislator opens up the door to say, hey, we can have a kid transfer any year they want to and multiple times, you're opening up the door for this association to be regulated by our legislature and to have kids transfer every single year that they're doing at the NCAA right now. So understand that, and that's why this proactive move. Will this happen on a regular basis and open up the floodgates? I don't know. I fear that myself, but I am willing to sacrifice that for us to have control right now over these transfers that are already currently happening, and that's where I stand on this. So, I understand that was a concern of mine at the very beginning. But we cannot come up with a policy that says you can only transfer and use this one-time transfer your freshman and sophomore year, and not your junior and senior year. So that's where we're at. Thank you.
Ms. Sloan, if I
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
Wade.
Colin, I agree with what you're saying. I understand it. Um, Unfortunately, like Rollins and Paul has said, there are powers out there that want to change it. I had a meeting this last summer with a member of the education committee, and there's already two BDRs out there about eligibility. That's going to be brought up in the next legislation session. And this legislator told me that if their preference is what Rollins said, a free transfer every year. And that's what they would like to see. And my discussions with them was we are already working on a one-time transfer. We're already working on something. And so being proactive is very important because if they have their way and if there's nothing already being presented by the NIAA, we will get run over at the legislature and they will dictate to us what's going to happen because there's a big push out there from legislators in the north and in the south that they would like to see full-time transfers every year. You can just go to whatever school you want whenever you want to. And so this is trying to control that scenario. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. Eligibility is very important, and we need to have a handle on it. And so this is better. What we have here is a good start, and I think something that we can take to the legislature that says that we're being proactive and this is what we're doing, and hopefully it ends with what we're presenting.
President,
Thank
I'd like to put myself in the queue when
Go
other
ahead,
members have the
Colin.
opportunity to speak.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, so I think I appreciate what you're saying, Wade. Thank you. I wonder if this will actually stop what you're saying, or if we are just kind of doing a thing and then the legislator is going to do something overriding it, right? So I think like I don't know all the time. I don't know that it's necessarily always appropriate for us to just try to respond and when they're going to do it anyway. Just a thought. Oh, Alex, that's what I was trying to find, the little hand raise thing. Thank you. I would also just question the spirit of this and what the spirit of this is, because what I believe the impact of this is negatively impacting our lowest FRL schools especially in Clark County School District. I believe that schools like that will have a significant impact in losing students left and right to schools where they believe that they will have more athletic success, right? So I think that would be a question I would have is like, what is to the legislators, to us as a group, like what is the spirit of this other than just responding to what we think the legislator is going to do? Why do we believe that this is the right move, right? And that would be something that I would, I don't know, we don't have to answer, but I think we should all think about like, why do we believe this is the right move? Other than just we're afraid of what the legislator is going to do.
Alex, did you have your hand up?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam President. I just
Absolutely.
want to respond to one thing that Colin was asking. So I have had 2 meetings in the past this year with lobbyists and 2 legislators, 1 senator and 1 assemblywoman. And when this first came out, which was actually prior to September, it was our previous meeting where we discussed it. Since then, they have not followed up to ask me for any meetings. So I'm assuming that it's because once they saw that NIAA was taking action, they haven't been pursuing more evening meetings with wine and showing me their draft. So I feel confident that it did stop at least some momentum with some of our legislators. Thank you.
You know what, Collins, this is Pam. I appreciate what you've said. I agree with you 100%. Because you and I've had these conversations, and I've had conversations with a lot of people, is that by us going forward with such a regulation, I feel that we are forgetting our neighborhood kids, those students that live in in the neighborhood too, and we're giving allowances for other people from outside of the zone of attendance to come in and take positions from our kids. If you recall too, that we as a board chose to be proactive because we knew this was coming. And that the board were the ones, and with the help and assistance of Kate and Paul, and that is why we have the language and the manner in which we are. So I firmly believe we need to make a decision now rather than not making a decision. And like Wade even said too, we don't need the legislators to come forth and say, listen, we're going to do it. We're going to open the floodgates every year. So at least this way we have some form of control.
Ms. Sloan, can I make another comment? This is Paul.
Sure, Paul, go ahead.
Pam?
Yes. Yes, Paul.
So, Colin, also, I understand what you're saying, and I feel your pain. I was the first one to say, when this concept came up, that the rich are going to get richer and the poor are going to get poorer. But I can also tell you that with respect to law in general, there tends to be a pendulum, okay? And the pendulum swings from side to side. You've just seen it recently, last Tuesday. And that's what's going to happen here, possibly. If there's mass exodus and schools, certain schools are being damaged and hurt as a result of this, I can guarantee you there will be a bill coming in one or two legislative sessions to go back to what we had. But I can also tell you that the overwhelming majority of associations in the country have some form of a transfer rule like this. We were one of the last that didn't. And I think that's one of the reasons the mandates come at us. And as others have said, I prefer that we control the dialogue as opposed to having it imposed upon us. And I just want you to know, I certainly appreciate what you're saying. I understand exactly what you're saying, because that's exactly what my thoughts have been and always will be with respect to this. But we're just going to have to see how it works.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Hey,
Questions?
Pam, it's Keith. I agree, and I'm appreciative of all the work. I know Kate's put a lot of time and effort, and Paul, you put a lot of time and effort in it. It's really good to try to get out in front of it. I just want to reiterate like you said, Paul, the haves and have-nots, those that do not have essentially a zone of attendance, because calling the state a zone of attendance is silliness. It really puts the onus that there's going to be a lot more transfers out of our neighborhood schools and transfers to the schools that are not neighborhood. And to Pam's point, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And that's the unfortunate side effect that I think we may see from this. That's already happening anyway. Now we're making it even easier. Thank you.
All right, so at this time, I'm looking.
Ms. Sloan, you have a couple people with their hands up.
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Sloan has her hand up.
Thank you, because I can't see the hands. Who else?
Sorry, hi, it's Deanna. I just wanted to make a comment though. By us not being proactive on this, I know a lot of people are worried about kids transferring in and, from different schools within our state. I'm more worried about the amount of kids that I see transferring out of our state and going to neighboring states to play because they feel trapped at the school that they're at and they feel like they don't have an option. And so I feel like this helps Nevada retain some of its top talent as well. And that's really important for us as a state as we try to build a competitive sports culture here. We want to retain our top athletes instead of always seeing them go, to California and Arizona, like some of the surrounding states.
Thank you. Anyone else have their hands up?
I think
All right, Rollins.
Linda Cavazos did.
Oh, wait, Rollins, let me go to Linda first. Ms. Cavazos.
Oh, thank you, Madam President. I was just going to reiterate pretty much a couple of the points that had been made by Wade and also by Alex that I also had been approached by lawmakers. And this has been going on for a while. The proactive component is, of course, extremely important. And I do hear you, Colin, as far as the concerns that you're stating. In my district, where I have both, shall we say, some of the more affluent areas and also some of the areas where our lower income and our kids in the neediest schools reside, the legislators have made it quite clear that if we weren't proactive on this, that they did want to go with the every year transfer. So I hear Colin as far as is the only reason that we're doing this because we're in fear of the legislators. Yeah, to a certain extent, because we would like to retain control of what's going on here. But I also have to think that we have to move in some direction to get this done. Otherwise, all control will be taken away from us. And I have to reiterate what Alex said. After I emphasized and showed them what was happening, the calls and the texts and the communications kind of dwindled down a little bit. So anyway, I think pretty much the rest of it has already been covered. I need my green card. You should mail us the green cards for these meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more, Rollins?
Yeah, I would like to end just with a message to the group that remember our previous regulations basically penalize those kids that went to those private and charter schools out of their residential area. When they wanted to go back to their zone school in the district, they had to sit out 180 days. And understand that our district, we see a lot of that where those kids are going to the private school or going to a non-district facility their first year and they come back. What the parents didn't realize when they did that is that they had to sit out 180 days now at their zone school in the public school system in Washoe County. This rule now allows those kids to come back and immediately play. So from that standpoint, I think the reverse could also happen, that those kids that are going to these stacked programs and that kind of stuff will be able to at least go back to their zone school where they live at, or another school in the district and hopefully a public school, and be able to participate. So understand that I don't think all is doom and gloom. I agree with you 100% that could that possibly happen a senior year with a group of kids? Sure, it could. But again, Kate mentioned, we still have some of our policies of recruiting and this kind of thing that we could bring up and deal with those specific issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Ms. Brockett has her hand up and so does Mr. McNaught.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Brockett?
Thank you. A clarifying question for me on the NRS. Right now, with what was passed the last legislative session, does the NRS clearly indicate that this is a one-time transfer and not a multiple year over year? Because I noticed that, obviously that's been brought up and that's what some legislators want. But right now, with the way NRS is stated and what has passed, it is allowing for a one-time transfer. Is that correct? It's not like open language that just says transfer.
Nothing was passed by the legislature last session in terms of a one-time transfer rule. There was an attempt and it was killed. And so, but the direction was to the NIAA to fix it and to come up with a solution, which is what we're doing here. And if we didn't, then it would be fixed for us, as others have already stated. So that's where we are. The legislature hasn't mandated anything yet, but will if we don't take care of it now.
Gotcha. And you said that, so it sounds like it was proposed in the last legislative session, but it did not pass in the last legislative session. Is that correct?
Right. We fought it hard, and it did not pass, but as I say, it was very clear that it will be coming back and it will pass this session if we don't do something on our own.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying for me.
All right, Mr. McNaught?
Just two things. One being a question. Is there an option to phrase this? So yes, we want to control the narrative. I understand that. Is there an option to write this or phrase this to protect schools from losing all of their talent, especially our schools with the lowest FRL? Is that an option to include something in here in order to protect that situation from happening? Because I believe it will happen quickly. And I mean, it's not just about athletic success, it's also about culture of a school. And when the athletic teams start to leave, right, and we end up with less success from an academic, it impacts the culture of the school. And so again, I want to stress, like, the schools with like the top 10 low FRL schools in Clark County School District will be hit extremely hard by this. And I don't think that is our intent. So my question, first the question, and then based on the answer to the question, I will make a comment. But Kate and Paul, is there an option, or is there a way in which to write this in order to protect schools like that, or protect the process in general? Maybe something with zone of attendance can be a factor here. Just wondering.
I don't know, Kate, do you want, I'll take first stab. So Paul Anderson, legal counsel. You know, Colin, we haven't looked at it from that standpoint. I can't say, and I'm not going to sit here and say there is no way, but I'm very doubtful that there is, because the concept of the one-time transfer is that it would apply to everyone. It wouldn't be designed so that that public schools are protected, but private, charter, and whatnot aren't. And so any regulation that's being proposed has to be all inclusive of all schools and all students and everything else. And so I don't know how you limit that. Like you say, the first 5 can go if they play these sports. I mean, that would be very difficult to do. I don't know how we would do it. And so, as I say, I think what needs to happen here is this regulation come into play. Let's see how it goes. And I'm telling you, if there's a landslide that like you think there will be, you have very powerful legislators in your area and whatnot that can turn this thing around in a couple years.
Okay, I appreciate that. I understand the question I asked you is like incredibly difficult to zoom in on. And so I think it sounds like it's an option that could be explored potentially, like it maybe hasn't like fully been explored is what I heard you say, Mr. Anderson. I don't know. And I'm not saying, you both have done a lot of work. Please don't misunderstand. I know that you all have done a ton of work on this, so I don't want it to come across that way. But what I'm thinking is it's an option that could be explored. But here's what I will close with. This will be my final comment on it, is that I don't want to be responsible for this situation, right? And so I would propose that we are only doing this because we are afraid of what the legislator might do. And I would propose that we let the legislator make that decision and potentially make that mistake and have to answer for it, and not the Board of Control answer for that. So that would just be my just a food for thought for comment. I struggle with, it doesn't really sound like we are making this decision because we think it is like, yes, this is the direction we have to go, other than that we are afraid of what the legislator might do, which they failed to do in the last session. And perhaps we could continue to advocate successfully as to why this would not be a good decision for the state of Nevada, right? So I would just propose that. Again, I may sit in the minority on that. I know I do not sit in the minority of it from high school principals in Clark County, but I only represent a portion of the state. So that is my opinion, and perhaps that's something we could consider, is to let the legislator make this decision and not us.
Rayanne Sorensen, parent representative. Colin, I'm not a fan of the one-time transfer personally. However, I get lots of comments from other parents who want it. And so I appreciate all of your comments, and I do feel like our hands are tied. And my personal opinion, I feel like this is the lesser of two evils. You know, I would much rather see just a one-time transfer versus blanket, open transfer like we have in college. Because I've heard lots of parents tell me kids should be able to go wherever they want, whenever they want. And I don't agree with that. So I just personally feel like, unfortunately, we need a transfer rule, and I am happy with at least a one-time transfer versus the state coming and saying open transfers.
Thank you, Rayanne. Is there any, I can't see if your hand is raised. Anybody else would like to comment? Okay. Hearing none, seeing none, we're looking for a motion at this time.
Rayanne Sorensen, I motion to approve NAC revisions returned from Legislative Council Bureau one-time transfer regulations.
Wade Polson, second.
Okay, we have a first, we have a second. Any further discussion or comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay,
Nay.
wait, hang on. I have Colin with a nay. Who else?
Brockett.
Rocket?
Whitman.
Should we roll call this vote, President Sloan, or no?
Sorry, I'm on my meeting for NIAA.
I think we're good. So I have the nays are Colin is Brockett and Whipperman.
Correct.
Anybody else? Okay, with that, motion passes. Thank you. All right, Mr. Jackson, would we like to go to the next NAC revision, number 10?
Yes, ma'am. I'm assuming we're going to do the public comment at this point. So I will then turn this over to Mr. Davis to bring in the people who are in the waiting room to make their public comment. And then we will read the other letters into the into the minutes at that point. Bart?
Point of
Oh, wait a
clarification. Go ahead, Ms. Sloan.
I apologize. I'm sorry.
My question was, did we want to go to item number 10?
I
before-
apologize. Number 10, please.
Okay, let's go to 10 NAC revision on page 48. Legislation, drop programs regulation. Kate, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thanks, Kate Square, for the record. This should be pretty quick. Last Board of Control meeting, it was discussed that we need to put in a layer of protection for our new regulation. This regulation has already been approved with the LCB, with the Board of Control, all of that. The specific section, which is this first section 2 here, outlines the what the penalties are going to be if you are unable to field a varsity team in every sport. The conversation came up that we need to have a layer of protection for some of our smaller rural schools who have been good members, and it's not a matter of, them not just wanting to have the team, as they simply can't because of enrollment, things like that. So what is added, if you take a look at the bottom of 51 in green, was a statement that basically just says the provisions of this specific section may be waived at the discretion of the executive director. And that is just that layer of protection that was asked to be added in. So that is the only change to this entire regulation section.
Thank you, Kate. Any questions, discussion on this one? All right, hearing none, I'm looking for a motion.
I make a motion to approve Keith Whipperman.
Okay, Mr. Whipperman, we have a first. I'm looking for a second.
Willie, second.
Thank you very much. We have a second by Alex. Any further discussion or questions in regards to this regulation?
Yeah, Wade Polson.
Go ahead.
Does this, so is this for new membership or is this for existing membership or both?
This is just during your 2-year period during realignment, any member.
Okay.
But it's primarily.
Bart Davis, is it okay if I speak, President Sloan?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I staff, just for clarification, this was the whole discussion that we went through about originally we were going to say a team that did not field a team would have to go on independent status for its next cycle and the remainder of the current cycle. The language that was put in there clears that up to allow the executive director to waive that if we had those schools that simply couldn't field a team due to enrollment. Now they've got a bunch of ninth graders in that are interested in starting that team back up again. The executive director would be able to waive that time and independent status, allow them to be back full in the league again. Does that clear that up for you, Mr. Polson?
Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions or discussions? All right, hearing none, seeing none, let's take it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I
Any opposed? The ayes have it and it passes. Thank you very much.
President Sloan, just a question on next steps here.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Anderson, what is next with these regulations that we approved? What is the next step in the process?
Paul Anderson, legal counsel. So the next step in the process, I've been waiting since our meeting in September to get to this meeting so that we have these regulations along with the others that we approved at the September meeting. I will be taking them back to the Legislative Council Bureau. These are where we're making changes. I'm going to ask that they implement those changes and submit these regulations, and then the ones that we also had back in September, I will be submitting those so that they are going to what we call the Legislative Commission for final hearing. And that's the group I've mentioned before at meetings. It's composed of state senators and assembly persons that meet occasionally to go over all the regulations for all the various agencies in the state and to vet them and eventually approve them. Once that's done and that meeting's held, then these will become law. They'll go into the regulation process and be law. And just so everyone knows, one thing I am going to request with respect to the one-time transfer rule is that clearly does not become effective until July 1, 2025. So it's not going to affect transfers this year.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Is the sportsmanship one of those as well, Paul?
That's one of the ones that has to go back for a couple of changes that similar to this, the board's already approved that. And that's going back to the LCB for final, to implement those changes and then go to the Legislative Commission for final approval.
Great. That one's important.
Yes.
Okay, so now let's go back to agenda number 8. The approval of 25-28 realignment for football only for possible action. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jackson. You're on mute.
Apologize, sorry. Paul and I are in the same room. We're trying to prevent the feedback. At this time, Mr. Davis, I think we bring in the people in the waiting room and then we can read the letters in after that, if that's okay with everyone. We have a couple of people in the waiting room have public comment on this, and we have some letters that will be read into the record. Ms. Wonder, I see you are now accessible again. Thank you. I appreciate you, and tell the Pal Station we're appreciative of them of getting you a room to function correctly. Thank you. Mr. Davis, I'm going to turn it over to you for this part.
Yeah, we do have 2 of the 3 that let us know in advance they'd like to make public comment. I believe Mr. Real, the principal at Western High School, is with us, and Ms. Cannon, the principal of Shadow Ridge High School, is with us. I have not seen our 3rd just yet into the waiting room. That was Mr. Cole, the principal of Mojave. So, President Sloan, if it is all right, we will let our members here that are here to make public comment do so.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And who will be doing the timing?
I will.
Okay, thank you. All
You're
right.
welcome. Mr. Real, if you are with us, if you can hear us, if you would like to start your public comment, please.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity, Madam President, members of the board, to discuss the realignment with respect to football overall. First of all, I want to say I appreciate the dialogue in which we're trying to create a system that has equality and equity both, and competitive football programs across our state. It should be noted that I was a college athlete. I also coached college football, so football was near and dear to my own heart. With that noted, as the principal of Western High School, and I think speaking collectively for the group of high school principals, we and I personally adamantly oppose this realignment plan on a variety of different reasons. One, and I think this is the most pressing point for me personally, is this new realignment rubric process creates the haves and the have-nots. And so when I initially heard of this process, I reached out to our district Title I office and asked for a list of the top 10 FRL schools in our district, which would be the schools that have the highest density of poverty students or students below the poverty line. And I looked at the list that was shared in advance of this. Schools 36 through 46 on the list of the proposed plan. So the bottom 10 schools, 6 of those schools represent the highest FRL schools in the Clark County School District in this order. Rancho, Sunrise Mountain being number 2, Western High School being number 3, Rancho being number 4 in terms of rank of highest FRL schools. El Dorado High School being number 6, Cheyenne High School being number 7, Bonanza High School being number 8. This is a list of have and have-nots. The top of that list of this structure, this organization, are those schools in the suburban ring in the Clark County School District, the Las Vegas area overall. This does not properly represent schools further from success in terms of academics, sports, or students below the poverty line. I would commend to you that the process that we use in every other sport, where we have an appropriate aligned divisions based off competitive level, 5A and 4A, will athletes in schools like Western High School have the opportunity to compete with other schools with similar competitive levels. I do not know why we would eliminate that from football alone when we don't do it any other place across our system overall there. I know there are other challenges that we're trying to address. The current system that has been in place for only 2 seasons is one that is largely supported by the Clark County School District. Every principal in support of that overall. So not sure why we're abandoning this with such a rushed process. We've not had time to vet this new idea through many stakeholders and consider the implications to every type of school overall. But again, my primary concern is the have and have-nots list, looking at the FRL list overall. Proposal would be that we keep a continued 4A and 5A, could still use in-season rubrics with the Harbin and Max Preps to determine in 4A and in 5A who makes the playoffs still. So you get the benefit of a better point system, and you can still have the super division at the top of 5A for those top tier schools overall, accomplishing everything that we want to and have competitive athletics across the board, no matter the type of school.
Thank you, Mr. Real. That is the 3 minutes. Thank you so much for your public comment, sir. At this point then, Ms. Sloan, are you ready for the second public comment?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cannon from Shadow Ridge, I believe you are here with us if you'd like to start.
Good morning. This is Mrs. Cannon. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good morning. My name's Tracy Cannon. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm the proud principal of Shadow Ridge High School, and I'm just here to support what my colleague, Mr. Real, said as well. I concur with both of his points that that this does create the haves and have-nots, and that keeping our current system that is only 2 years old that seems to be working would be the better option. As a school from the suburban ring, I'm also concerned because we're a team member with CCSD as well, and having all schools be able to play competitively and shoot for what is their goal is the goal of athletics. It teaches you so much more than just winning and losing, but coming in 100-degree heat in summer and knowing that you don't have a possibility of making the playoffs seems fundamentally unfair. So I'm just here in support of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other public comments, Bart?
Oh, I apologize, Ms. Sloan. The third person has not come into the room, so I would suggest maybe we have the public comments that were sent in be read into the record to allow time maybe for that third person if he does come in.
Okay.
Is that person Mr. Roberts by chance?
Say that again, Tia.
Is that person Mr. Roberts that we're waiting for? I received an email about that person just now.
No, ma'am, it was Mr. Cole that we were waiting
Okay. Before I start reading, I do need to send you another name that was just given to me that wants to speak. Is that okay?
Certainly, yes, please.
Okay, let me do that real fast and then I'll read. Okay, I'm going to turn my camera off so that you guys don't have to see my forehead while I try and read my screen, okay? First public comment is going to be from Carson High School. To the NIAA Board of Control, I am writing to address the agenda concerning the realignment of football, which was discussed during the meeting held on October 29th. Unfortunately, our request for additional information regarding this matter was not granted, and we received a new information packet 9 days later. Consequently, please consider this letter as a formal expression of the Carson City School District's opposition to the plan presented during the emergency meeting on October 29th, 2024. During the committee meeting, the potential adoption of the Harbin point system for the implementation of Nevada was reviewed for the first time. This system is currently utilized in Ohio and West Virginia. In Ohio, it involves 10 games and 16 playoff slots across 710 schools, whereas the NIAA football consists of 9 games with an optional 10th game, Hall of Fame, which incurs an additional fee to the NIAA. Implementing a framework of 10 games while competing against teams with only 9 or 8 games could potentially diminish our strength of a schedule concerning both Harbin and Max Prep's rankings. It is crucial to recognize that Max Prep's rankings can decline even following a victory, depending on the performance of the opposing team. Conversely, the Harbin system employs rubric points that reflect current season outcomes. The NIAA rubric considers past performance and victories in other sports. Although combining these 3 elements may seem more equitable, we acknowledge that this system is not without its flaws. We advocate for maintaining the current bracket system of relegation and question why the 5A3 classification was not incorporated into the 4A classification, and why schools with the appropriate populations were not included in 4A, while their winning records were protected during the realignment process prior to the official appeal on December 3rd. The integration of the 3-point system significantly influences schools' playoff seeding and qualification opportunities. Notably, while Max Preps evaluates teams outside of the NIAA, a common practice in Northern Nevada, the Harbin system does not. Currently, Carson City is ranked 17th in the Harbin system and 30th in Max Preps. However, the specific date of this assessment was not provided in the packet. These rankings are based on league schedule that includes victories against teams with 1 point in Harbin and at the bottom of the Nevada Max Prep rankings. Carson competed against 3A classification teams with 1 point Harbin, classification, Spring Creek and 4A Canyon Springs, which has positioned Carson at 21st in terms of playoff qualifications within this league. This situation similarly impacts other schools in the league and potential opponents from Southern Nevada. On page 27 of the packet, it is essential for the seating committee to provide clarity regarding the establishment of an appeal process based on league schedules, as discussed in the committee meeting and to be determined by the NIAA. The current system, now in its 2nd year, appears to be functioning effectively. I recommend considering adjustments such as promoting 2 teams and relegating 2 teams, or allowing the highest finishing team in the playoffs to be promoted while retaining their position if they finish at 1. For context, Montana has 80 schools of football, including 64 11-man teams, and employs a predetermined bracket amongst classification.
Ms. Wonder, I apologize. That is 3 minutes.
Okay. I'm just going to read these in the order that they're in my computer. All right, moving on to the next one. Dear Ms. Wonder, I apologize for not being available to participate in public comment section of the Board of Control meeting, but I have some serious concerns regarding the football realignment proposal under consideration. I do hope my concerns will be adequately communicated and carefully considered, because as the principal of Palo Verde High School, I am compelled to voice my strong opposition for several critical reasons. Our current alignment structure has a widespread support of majority of CCSD principals and is considered by us to be very effective. This current structure has enhanced the athletic landscape for our teams and fostered a healthy competitiveness that allows many of us to reach state championship contests. The newly proposed playoff structure is wildly insufficient and clearly reduces football team participation. Even more troubling, it would disproportionately impact schools serving our most economically disadvantaged students. With our commitment and focus on equity in CCSD, I'm surprised this playoff structure was even drafted in the first place. The accelerated timeline of this change is also concerning. A shift of this magnitude requires comprehensive input from all stakeholders to ensure a fair solution that considers every type of school in our district. Lastly, I feel compelled to state that the obvious that this proposal overlooks a fundamental and cancerous issue in CCSD football competition: the persistent disparity between schools bound by strict attendance zones and those without zoning restrictions. To even entertain another realignment structure that does not eliminate this error is unacceptable. Thank you for considering these points and for keeping our student athletes front and center in your decision-making process. Sincerely, Lisa Schumbacher, principal at Palo Verde High School.
If I could stop you, Ms. Wonder, real quick, we do have some live public comment, if that's all right, to get this person in since he's in the waiting room. Ms. Sloan, are you okay with that?
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts, I believe you are here with us at this point and has to give public comment, sir. If I could stop you, Ms. Wonder, real quick, we do have some live public comment, if that's all right, to get this person in since he's in the waiting room. Ms. Sloan, are you okay with that?
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, Mr. Roberts, I can hear you. I think you still have the YouTube version on. If you could mute the volume on that.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay.
Yeah,
Hang on a second.
that's the delay. Stop you, Ms. Wonder, real quick. We do have some live public comment, if that's all right, to get this person in since he's in the waiting room. Ms. Sloan, are you okay with that?
Can you hear me? Can you get?
There we go. We've got it muted. Mr. Roberts, you'll have 3 minutes when you're ready, sir.
All right. Thanks. I just want to kind of chime in and second what Mr. Rael and Ms. Cannon, their opinions and what they've already voiced. My thoughts about this issue really come down to the fact that, we just started this current system 2 years ago. And at this point, I don't see why we're already ready to throw this system out and start another. I get that, there may be flaws in the system, but there are always flaws in every system. We all know that. We all work in schools. We all work for, multi-layer agencies. There's not going to be a perfect system. And I think that constantly changing the rules and the divisions it makes no sense from an organizational standpoint. I think it makes us look foolish in terms of an athletic regulatory agency. It's like we don't know what we want or how to get what we want. The fact that there are, maybe some schools that don't make the playoffs, or making the playoffs that shouldn't, which was brought up in our meeting with Tim the other day, is a problem for some people. Well, you're always going to have that kind of thing happen. I've advocated for years for, another classification. I really think that, the state ought to be, 6 divisions. My home state, which has about the same number of schools and people as Nevada, has 6A's or 6 divisions and has for years. I know that's not an option, and I'm not advocating for that because I know it's not going to happen anytime soon. But this is the closest thing to it, and I think it works for the largest number of schools, and I think we ought to keep it. I just don't see any reason why we're tossing this out already when it seems to be working for the vast majority of schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Kent.
Okay, next public comment. Good afternoon, Tia. Unfortunately, I am unable to attend tomorrow's meeting on realignment, but I would like to add a comment as the principal of Rancho. My comment is specifically in regards to the approval of realignment for football only. As principal of Rancho High School, I am opposed to the current realignment proposal for several reasons. One, the proposal made by Mr. Jackson creates inequitable experience for student athletes who attend schools serving students who are impacted greatly by poverty. The system will make it very difficult for schools like ours to build and field competitive teams. Simply put, the system creates two tiers of schools, the have and the have-nots. Our goal is to build a competitive program where we have the chance to make the playoffs and earn that opportunity. Students who don't believe they have a chance at the postseason will turn away and look for other opportunities. We expect no guarantee of the playoffs, just a chance to earn our way into the postseason. 2, the new proposal fails to deal with the greatest football alignment problem that allows our schools with no zoning restrictions to compete against schools with fixed attendance zoning boundaries. While Rancho has a wonderful magnet program, our programs attract a different type of student who isn't necessarily interested in football. We are still a public school and rely heavily on our zoned students to field many of our athletic programs. 3, the new proposal is extremely rushed, not allowing appropriate time for all stakeholders to consider the implications of the decision and potentially proposing a plan that meets the needs of all types of schools. Allow the principals of our schools the opportunity to dialogue with one another and propose a more equitable system. We are reasonable people who only want what's best for all the students in Nevada. Thank you, Norm Smith, Principal of Rancho. Okay. Next one. Dear Realignment Committee, good afternoon. I understand that you are all doing an incredible amount of work for our teams and schools, but as the principal at Bonanza High School, I feel it is important to share my concerns regarding the current realignment proposal. The existing alignment, which has only been in place for 2 years, has received strong support from CCSD principals and has successfully fostered competitive state champions. The proposed changes, as I see them, will result in a significant reduction of teams making the playoffs. This will disproportionately impact the schools with high poverty rates such as mine. Schools like Bonanza already have a difficult time finding students to participate, so I really don't like the possibility of giving potential student athletes another reason to refrain from playing. Additionally, this proposal does not adequately address the pressing issue of schools without zoning restrictions competing against those with fixed attendance boundaries, which creates an uneven playing field. This, once again, would negatively impact our school. Finally, I believe the timeline for this proposal is rushed and it does not provide sufficient opportunity for all stakeholders to fully consider the implication of these changes, risking the development of a plan that truly meets the diverse needs of all schools. Thank you for considering my perspective on this important matter. I appreciate your attention to these concerns. Best regards, Brian Wiseman, Principal at Bonanza. Okay. To the NIAA Board of Control, as the principal of Las Vegas High School, I'm opposed to the current realignment proposal for several reasons. The current alignment, which is only 2 years old, has been well supported by CCSD principals while creating competitive state champions. The proposed realignment has far too few football teams making the playoffs and creates significant underrepresentation of schools with the highest student poverty rate. The new realignment proposal does not deal with the greatest football. The new realignment proposal is extremely rushed and does not allow appropriate time for all stakeholders to consider implications of the decision and potentially proposing a plan that meets the needs of all types of schools. We all know the elephants in the room and the situation involving well-funded and well-lawyered private schools. There are now new schools which are becoming factories for various sports due to transfer concerns such as Slam for wrestling and various Somerset and Pinecrest academies for swimming and cross country. The proposed realignment does not take an accurate pulse of what all schools with competing sports teams would like to see for our student athletes. Thank you for your time. Raymond Ortiz, Principal of Las Vegas High School. Okay. Next one. As the principal of Sierra Vista High School, I must voice my opposition to the proposed realignment for football only for several critical reasons. Unfortunately, I will not be able to speak in the meeting due to a previously scheduled conference, so please note my concerns below. 1, our existing alignment structure, implemented just 2 years ago, has proven successful, garnering support from CCSD principals while fostering competitive teams that have achieved state championships. 2, the proposed playoff structure is inadequate, significantly reducing football team participation. More concerning, it would disproportionately impact schools serving our highest poverty student populations. 3, this proposal fails to address the fundamental inequity of football competition, the ongoing disparity between schools bound by strict attendance zones and those operating without zoning restrictions. 4, the hasty implementation timeline is problematic. Such a significant change demands thorough consideration from all stakeholders to develop a solution that equitably serves every type of school in our district. Thank you for your time and attention to this matter. Jessica Lovell, Principal at Sierra Vista High School. I've got one more. NIAA Board of Control. As the principal of Desert Oasis High School, I am opposed to the current football realignment proposal for several reasons. The current alignment, in place for just 2 years, has garnered strong support from CCSD principals and fostered competitive divisions. For the first time since Desert Oasis opened, our school is competing in a league championship game in football, resulting in a positive impact on school culture. The proposed realignment would have too few football teams qualifying for playoffs, with several schools never having a realistic opportunity to play meaningful competitive games. This would surely have a negative effect on athletics and school culture in these schools. The proposal also significantly underrepresents schools with the highest student poverty rates, creating a concerning equity issue. More critically, the proposal does not address the most significant issue with the current alignment: the competition between schools with no zoning restrictions and those with fixed attendance boundaries. Desert Oasis in particular has been disproportionately affected by this imbalance, given its proximity to private schools. Schools with no zoning restrictions should be in their own league, as they are in many other states. Finally, the proposal feels rushed, leaving insufficient time for all stakeholders to fully evaluate its potential implications. This hasty approach risks overlooking the need for a plan that better meets the diverse needs of all types of schools. Thank you for your consideration. Ian Salzman, principal of Desert Oasis High School. And that's the last one I have.
Thank you, Tia. All right, we will continue on, and again, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Jackson so he can explain what we have in front of us. You're on mute, Tim.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go to page 26, if you would. 20 up to page 25 is the policies and procedures. We included them so that you could reference them back to ensure that we have followed them as well. What you have in front of you today is the NIAA rubric, Harbin points, and Max Preps ranking system. Currently, the state of Nevada has the NIAA rubric, which we've been utilizing for multiple years. Harbin points are not new. They are a system of scoring and evaluating dating back to the 70s. The Max Preps ranking system has been in place for many years as well, and we're all familiar with those. What you have here is a combination of all three systems into one. Hold on, Bart. Don't go that fast, please. Thank you. You have a combination of all three. Where did these come from? A little information for you on the backside. All three of these systems have been represented to the realignment committees over the course of the realignment committee tenure that we have recently gone through. They are not new to this week. They are in there, and we've looked at them. The realignment committee sent forth a proposal to the board. The board said, no, go back, reduce the number of playoff positions. And the realignment committee then taxed the staff of the NIAA to come up with a system. And this is what we have come up with. And this is what we are presenting. The Harbin points and Max Preps utilizes a mathematical ranking system. For justification or for your information, the Harbin points are based on strength of schedule. The system is designed to take where a team is playing currently versus where a team has played historically. The rubric system for the NIAA is a rear view mirror, looking back. It is not an indicator of future success. The Harbin point system takes a look at where a team is playing competitively now. The Harbin points then award a team for their strength of schedule as well. So a team receives points for the win, and they receive second level points for the wins of their opponent. In other words, if you play a tougher schedule, you get more second level points. The Max Preps ranking system is Max Preps. They do it every week. Usually it comes out on Monday. They have a dynamic system that utilizes a ranking that is on your strength of schedule, who you played, and where you played. Some other aspects of this that are a little bit different before I get into the meat of this. The rubric looks at in-state competition, no out-of-state. So we do not count for the out-of-state competition in the same manner. So a school that plays in-state opponents are on our rubric system. Harbin points look at in-state opponents and out-of-state opponents, so that we have to track their schedule as well. So if you play modern day, we track modern day schedule, and we continue to accumulate second level points. The Max Preps ranking looks at in-state and out-of-state as well as strength of schedule. One misnomer that's been out there, I want to make sure we clear it up right now. Not one of these systems rewards any school for running the score up. There is no margin of victory for that. As a matter of fact, it does not factor into it in any way, shape, or form. It's called a non-competitive win within our own rubric. Harbin points, it's a win is worth a value, a loss is worth no value. And Max Preps, we have the ability to make sure that is not a factor as well, and it's not going to be a factor. So go ahead, Bart. Thank you. The RHM system, which is what we're going to call this, would be maintained throughout the season with weekly updates, posting a team's current point total after the 5th competitive week. Why the 5th competitive week? Well, for the most part, it's because that's when everything starts to really be filled. The first couple of weeks, you don't have a lot of full games. You have spotty schedules. You have open dates. But then by the 5th competitive week, we start to see a full schedule. Everyone has a full slate of games. There are only a few buys filtered in throughout that. And it allows us to maintain it. This is not something different from any other state. And I would like to indicate that there are multiple states using this system. Washington, Utah, they all have a RPI, they call it RPI system, as well as there was mention of Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, West Virginia. There are Arizona has it as well. They're using a RPI as a factoring system. So the 3 ranking numbers then would accumulate to make value. Harbin points would be assessed as a single accumulated value. And Max Preps rankings would be utilized on a week-to-week basis, starting the 5th competitive week, and rubrics in the same manner. As the schools are achieving their base ranking, we would then assess them a value. If you are ranked number 1 in the state of Nevada, you would receive a 1, 2, 3, and commensurate all the way down through that. Your rubric point ranking would also be done in the same manner. If you had the most rubric points, you would be assessed a value of 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. And then the Harbin point ranking would be the same. So the final ranking of a school would be done in the following manner. Your Harbin point ranking plus your rubric point ranking to your Max Prep ranking divided by 3 would give you final point value. At the end of the season, the tournament seeding committee would come together with the final rankings, and they would seed the tournament. Teams would be placed into a postseason bracket based on their final rankings and reviewed by this committee. Over the weekend, I was invited to attend as an observer the Washington State seeding committee meetings. I attended soccer and I attended football. I was an observer and I got to listen to how the conversations were held, how the rankings were done, and the manner in which they seeded the tournament. Much larger state than Nevada in terms of participation, but they used the ranking system, and then they talked about where teams should be seeded in a tournament. Some of the tournament seeding was done 1 through 16, straight down the line. Some of the tournament seeding was not done 1 through 16. They looked at a team and said, this team is playing better at this point, their strength of schedule, and they adjusted the seeding. The other thing they did was they also looked at the seeding and said, we don't want teams to be traveling across the state. Things that we've all discussed in this as a process of seeding out the tournament. So I'm going to go now into a few questions about the Harbin point system and show you how that works. The points are earned for each game you defeat an opponent and your defeated opponent's win, which are called second level points. No 4A school, which is what we're discussing, 4A enrollment schools, plays a 1A school because 1A schools play 8-man football. There's no competition between those. There are some occasions where 4A schools play 2A schools and a 3A school, and of course the 4A. A victory against a 4A school is worth 6 points flat. 3A 4 and 2A 2. First level points are awarded for each game a team wins. No points are awarded for games lost. There's no moral victory. There's no, oh, we only lost by 1. And there's also no added bonus for running the score up. Second level points are awarded as a result of your defeated team's opponents that they defeat. So if you defeat an opponent, that awards the winner, the losers, first level points for the entire season. So if I'll get to the equation later instead of trying to do it right now. No second level points are awarded for losing to an opponent. So if you lose, you do not get any points at all. It's 0. And a divisor is used to determine second level points. It's based on the number of games your opponents have played. And for each open date, it's a smaller divisor. So if you have a school that plays 9 games, the divisor is lower. If you have a school that plays 10 games, the divisor is higher. It does not account for or allow for any other game outside of the allotted 10 within our regulation, 9 plus Hall of Fame. The reason being is those games are usually showcase games that are out of state, like the Snellenberger that we used to do in Arizona, or the Geico game that's after the regular season is over. Those games do not have any basis for us to be used. Before any games are played, the computer assumes that an opponent on each school schedule will play a full complement of games. The divisor is 100, 10 weeks, 10 opponents, 100 points. That does not say you have to play 10. It says it's assuming that number. Each week of the season, each open date that occurs for an opponent that a school has played to date, they subtract the divisor by 1. In other words, in week 5, if you have completed 5 games, your divisor would then remain at 100. If it's not 5 games, it's moved down. So as you fill your schedule in, your divisor changes, so there's fluctuation within your number. If one opponent on the school schedule has an open date, the divisor goes down to 99, 98, so on. Non-member NIAA school opponents are assigned a point value of 5.5, as we don't know their ranking system. But instead of penalizing you playing out of state, we're giving you the ranking of 5.5, which is halfway between our 3A and our 4A. Some states have divisions of 7. Some have them in reverse. So 1A in Nevada may not be the same as 1A in Wisconsin if you were to play a Wisconsin school. We use an average between a 3A and a 4A. That's the basis for that, and it's very common. It is our responsibility as a member school to report the weekly results of the games and submit them by 10 a.m. on Monday following the game. If they are not posted, we don't have it. We can't do the calculations. That is nothing that is unheard of. It's making sure the scores are correct. That way we are verifying all of the information before we release any of the information. Only 10 games will count. We will not count beyond that, which I've already mentioned. And postseason is not applicable anymore, as we do not need to use postseason because this is for postseason seeding only. Currently, the rubric in reverse looks back at your postseason and does accumulate some points there. Margin of victory is not a factor. It does not matter. Computer ranking example. So this is an example of how the computer ranking would work. Team A is a 4A school, and they go 3-0 in their first 3 games. Each opponent Team A has defeated is a 4A enrollment-based school. Opponents 1 and 2, each are Team A defeated, are 2-1 with their victories coming over 4A schools. Opponent 3, which Team A defeated, is 1-1. So they have not played the full complement yet. They've only played 3 games, with its margin of victory coming over a 4A school. Opponent 3 has 1 open date. On the first level point, our Team A has accumulated 18 points, 3 wins, 6 points each, 6.0 first level points. On the second level point, they're going to get 12 points from opponent 1. 2 wins times 6 for defeating a 4A opponent, 12 points. 2 wins times 6 for defeating the 4A opponent from opponent 2, 6 points. 1 win from the 6 points defeating a 4A opponent from opponent 3 gives you a total of 30 points. 30 points are then divided by 99, since opponent 3 has 1 open date. Multiplied by 10 gives you a 3.0303 second level point. So total points for that victory is 9.03. That's where that would go. During week 4, opponent has an open date. Then the second point divisor for Team A for week 4 becomes 98, because opponent 3 has had 1 open date, and now opponent 1 has 1 open date. So as you can see, this will fluctuate during the season and will be based upon how well you're doing and how well your opponents are doing in that season. So then we would learn how to read our Harbin points. And the Harbin points are read simply across the level. It would have the school name in the front. Level 1 points, it would show 18. Level 2 points, it showed the 30. The average using the math, and then their ranking, and that would be how we would allow the schools to fall in there. You can do the math in reverse to verify, which is that part right there. Okay, Art, go ahead up to the max preps. The Max Preps ranking is an RPI, Rankings Percentage Index. This is a very common method. Some states have their own, some states use Max Preps. And here's what the components of the formula mean. The winning percentage is calculated by dividing the number of wins by the total number of games played. Tie is worth half a win. Other winning percentage is your opponent's winning percentage, calculated by the average as well. And opponent's winning percentage is calculated by using those factors as well. And you see they add those together and they come up with their RPI. And those are posted each week. Then the RMH or RHM system sets up two separate brackets for the postseason. This is where it changes, and this is where we've felt some of the heartburn that we've been hearing about. Instead of the 4A enrollment-based schools being divided into 4A, 5A1, 2, and 3, they would be divided into 4A and 5A only. Currently, in the 4A, 5A1, 2, and 3, there are 57 schools, with 45 of them making it to the postseason for a 79% appearance rate. In concert with that, divisions 1A, 2A, and 3A, which constitute 52 schools, are setting at 28 representation, which is 53%. So the 4A, while it has 5 more schools, has a substantial larger postseason tournament. This would then reduce that down to 2 divisions, 5A and 4A. The state championship tournament would consist of 4 teams at least, but not more than 10 teams, because we can't go beyond that. We'd have so many buys. Within enrollment-based, plus any other open enrollment, using my words, plus any other enrollment-based schools that appealed up and were already seated in the 4A. The state championship tournament will consist of no more than 16 teams in the 4A and no more than 20 teams total. So the brackets could look different depending on the results of the Harbin points, the rubric points, and the max preps, but we would stop it at 20. There would be 20 schools competing in 5A and 4A. Only teams eligible for postseason would be considered for placement by the committee. So we would have a seeding committee come in and they would seed the tournament. The committee can use any available information to seed the tournament, but all information must be from the current season only, not looking back at previous success. No other results, nothing but the information we have for this season. There will be no single metric used by the committee. The committee will consist of a wide variety of data and information inputs, and they will consider it all, but the committee will establish the final rankings on selection day. As a result, the committee will not consider the results of any game played after selection day, which means the postseason there's no game in between. If there were a dead week in there, we would not consider that after the selection day. The committee does not set game times. Game times will be set by the NIAA once the bracket is seeded, and the decisions of the committee will be final, and they may not be appealed. It's staff or the Board of Control. We will set the tournament bracket, and that will be the bracket we will use for the postseason. So let's take a look at what this would look like. Couple of caveats here. 1, 5A1 went a week longer due to the size of the tournament bracket. They're smaller, so they were allowed to play 1 extra week. So with that being said, we stopped it. As you can see, we stopped it, and those would be what the rankings would be based on that last week being played. So the rubric scores are listed in the first column with a ranking 1 through all the way to the bottom, which I believe Bart goes to 46. Yep. Then the Harbin score using this season only. We used this season only. Those are the rankings there. And we used the current season we were participating in. And then before we presented this, we pulled the max preps rankings that came out on, I think it was Tuesday that week, Monday or Tuesday. And that was their ranking. Then we came up with their combination score. So as you can see, Bishop Gorman is setting first in rubric points, second in Harbin points, and first in max preps for a combo score of 4 divided by 3 gives them a ranking of 1.33. And subsequently, the rest of the rankings are all the way down. If we were to draw the line at number 20, the number 20 school would be Foothill High School. And you can see, based on this, how competitively close it was between Foothill and Carson. 2.333 versus 22.6667. 0.3334 difference. If I'm, or 3.6, my math's wrong. But very, very competitive. And at which point we would then seed out the tournament. And we would seed it into 2 separate brackets. At this point, I'm going to stop and I'm going to start asking for questions and see what we have out there.
So
Mr.
Tim-
Jackson, I'm going to let Mr. Stallworth go first, please.
Okay. Tim, based on this formula here and going down from Foothill on up, what does this look like regarding 5A, 1, 2, 3, and all that stuff that we currently have now? What would this be broken down into 2 different playoff groupings of 10? How does that work?
So based on this, I think the committee would come together, and I'm not saying who's the committee. I'm just telling you, just off my eyes, looking at this, I would look at this and I would say that there would be 4 teams in the 5A bracket. Right there. So it would be Gorman, Lutheran, Faith, Arborview, and Minogue based on those rankings. And then the remaining 16 would be broken into a second bracket from Reed High School all the way down to Foothill. And with that, I would also say that we would then look at seeding the tournament to avoid travel constraints, ensure that we're not having teams crisscross the state week after week, but also providing a competitive competition in the postseason. So I think that's what it would look for this year. I think that's what this would look like.
So the top 4 schools then would be in basically a 2-week scenario where the state championship would be in 2 weeks.
Yes. I think we would go bye, play, bye, state championship for that scenario. Yeah, so it would stay together so that we didn't have one state championship ending here and one state championship ending here.
Okay.
It would all end on the same weekend.
Okay.
Best as possible.
All righty.
Considering our agreement with the Legion does bring us into the following week. Other questions?
Now, those schools that, we heard a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot because of the number of schools here, but we did hear from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 11 schools commented on being against this. I don't know if there were more. I mean, we have, 40 something schools being represented. And there was, I think, 11 comments that were made against this one and sticking with what we have. By showing us this in the proposal, what does the current one look like in terms of the number of teams in the playoffs and going? Because I know the board, we had mentioned that we had too many state championships. Would this reduce it by 1?
This would reduce it by 2.
This would reduce.
We would have a 4A state champion and a 5A state champion.
Okay.
And I will say, Rollins, which we have in all the other sports. I mean, we don't have any other I don't want to use the word excessive, it's a bad word, but extraneous divisions. We have 4A, 5A.
And so this would bring football back into the mainstream with regards to what we're doing with all the other sports.
Yes.
Okay.
Bart, I want to bring you in to clarify anything I may have misspoken on or was not clear, if you don't mind.
No, absolutely. Bart Davis and I staff. One thing with these numbers that you see up here, right? They're based on the current leagues and the current schedules. So when you look at a team that maybe an eye test would consider to be what you think should be better than where they're at in the ranking, part of it is because of the schedule they're playing right now, right? We have all our 5A1 teams all in the same division, all beating each other up for 6 weeks of the year. 5A2, the same thing. To go along with this, we would need to have a situation where the leagues were slightly more balanced across, not just balanced within competitive balance, but also to the fact that you wouldn't necessarily have the 5 or 6 best teams all in the same league beating each other up and maybe artificially putting a situation where a team would make the playoffs. For instance, when you look at a Centennial, right now, Centennial is still very much alive with the potential to play for a state championship. Right, because of where they're situated right now, they've gotten beaten up by a couple of teams. Their rating isn't as high as it would be. So the leagues would look a little bit different to this. But where you finish in your league per se would not determine where you're at in the playoffs. We currently have that. Where you finish in your league determines which line you go on whichever bracket it is you're on right now. So there would be a couple other changes to this. Another great example is when you look at Liberty sitting here on line 14. Well, their max preps rating is very high at a 3. They've played a lot of out-of-state teams that max preps considers very good. Their rubric rating is 16. They haven't won as many of those games, and their Harbin point rating is 27. Again, they've won 3-4 games. That's it. When you look up top, why is Faith Lutheran ranked higher in a rubric score, a Harbin score rather, than Bishop Gorman? Faith Lutheran ran the table. When you run the table in the Harbin, you are in a lot better position to pick up points because every one of your opponents then is getting points for you as well. Bishop Gorman lost a game in there to Matter Day, I believe. So that's why theirs is ticked down just a little bit. So there are some different formulas to this. And trust me, between Mr. Jackson and I, we went through a ton of calculations on a lot of this stuff. And as you look, there is not a single one of these systems that is ideal. We have heard from the Coaches Association in the South that they were very much in favor of using a max preps rating. Well, again, it's got some of its flaws too. When you look at teams that maybe are ranked, 5th in a Harbin score and ranked 22nd in a max preps rating. So there's some ins and outs to everything here. It's a big change. It is. But we also need to keep in mind that when we went to the system that we're in right now, it was very much a trial period. We went through all those discussions and all those meetings, and I don't think we settled on anything. Correct me, Ms. Sloan, Mr. Stallworth, you were a part of all this. It was February or March before we finally had everything locked down and we were going round and round on stuff. That was just supposed to be a trial to get us through those 2 years. Am I correct?
Thank you.
You're correct.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we're in a situation now where we were taxed by our realignment committee came up with an idea, put it forward to the board. Board of Control told us reduce the number of championships. This does that, right? Is it perfect? There's not a system out there that is. There just isn't. But this takes us into a situation where we are reducing those championships. Everybody does have the opportunity to play for something, and it gives us the opportunity also to explore that area where we can have leagues where each team is more competitive with the other teams in its league. Mr. Jackson, did I miss anything?
No, thank you, Bart. Ms. Sloan, if you don't mind, I can see who has their hands raised if you want me to, or if you can't see it. I don't know what you're viewing right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I see everybody, but I don't see if hands are up.
Ms. Brockett?
No, thank you. I just have a couple clarifying questions. I have some discussion points, but I'll save that for later. For clarifying questions, you had mentioned a seating committee. Currently, is there a seating committee in existence?
No, ma'am, there is not. This would be new.
Okay. So this would with this new system, a seating committee would have to be established. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And do we have guidelines right now on the seating committee, or right now is it just seating committee where we don't have saying that we have one person from region 1, one person from region 2. It's not that far yet. Am I correct in saying that?
You are correct in saying that. I can tell you through conversations that we have had internally in our office and with other individuals and others, representation of other states, that seating committee will be very small. It will be people with no vested interest in a team. In other words, if you're setting it number 20, we don't want you making the determination as to the seating of the tournament. We're trying to look for people with insight, awareness, and no ulterior motive in the background. In other words, we want the unbiased view. For lack of better terms, it's almost as if we're looking at the seating committee for the NCAA basketball tournament. That's a group of individuals that come in there that don't have the authority to vote on their own team or their own placement for their own team, so that we can avoid any appearance of any impropriety, because seating a tournament is not a hard process and it's not an easy process. I know there would be some discussion based on multiple levels of this. I can already tell right now from the discussion that we've had that seating committee will be an appointment, and that appointment will come to the board. I don't see how that could not come to the board. It needs to be approved by the board because the board is saying, do this and use this aspect. So those two things would have to be board approved.
No, thank you for that clarification and that insight of where, since it's not outlined within this plan. Also then from what you just said with that insight, besides there's no due process in terms of what the seating committee decides is what the seating committee decides, correct?
Correct, because we are drawing the line at 20 with this
Okay.
process. Since the line is drawn at 20, they know that those 20 teams are in the postseason. Those 20 teams will be seeded out into the tournament in some manner or in some fashion. What I foresee is this. I see that if we put this into a situation where that stipulation is added, someone's going to come to the board and say, well, I really think I can win the 4A state tournament. I would rather win the 4A than go play in the 5A state tournament where I'm going to lose. So we would avoid that kind of conflict by just saying, these are the 20 teams that are in the playoffs. Here's the brackets we're going to play at that point.
And then, Mr. Jackson, you also mentioned that the seating committee couldn't have any personal vested interest, right? Or somehow sway, right, one way or another. I'm going to play 4A instead of 5A because I can win the 4A instead of the 5A, whatever it might be. So with that, timing wise, because if you're saying that the seating committee has to be appointed or approved by the board, how does that look logistically, timing wise, to actually get a seating committee in place in time to map out the playoff schedule when you really don't start the looking at the calculation of scores until you said week 6, correct?
So the seating committee would be appointed prior to this all occurring. My vision for this, and I think I speak for Bart on this as well, we discussed this numerous times, is in September, the seating committee would be appointed. So in other words, we would have to know who that is. The seating committee would then come together on the Saturday after the season ended. That would be the selection meeting where they would go in and seed the tournament. We would already know who they were. We would have the final points and accumulated totals on that day. We would come in on Saturday. We would mirror that with what other states are doing. The seating committee for Washington that I attended on Sunday, the season ended Friday. They cleaned everything up on Saturday. They met on Sunday. They had a timeline in which they had to release their information. I think the same would hold true for us to allow for us to get those brackets out as quickly as possible. That way we would have them out to everyone within 48 hours of the end of the season is what the plan is. And that way we would know who they were, as in who's on the committee, and the selection of that committee would be then paramount to make sure that we don't put a potential coach, principal, athletic director for a team that's in there. If you see where I'm trying to head with this, we're looking at people who have vested interest in the athletic end of this, but also the competitive end of it, that we're avoiding the conflict of interest that could arise. We have had some conversations about this within internally. People like the commissioner of the Northern Sports, Bob Levitt. He is not a coach. He is not tied to any one school. He is a 5A commissioner. He has a vested interest, yes, in the 5A or 4A, 5A/5A, but he does not have a vested interest to a school. Bart Davis, myself, maybe even a 3A athletic director or commissioner would be someone to consider too, just so we can make sure there's no appearance of impropriety on that committee. I would want that committee seated so that they could be discussing these things throughout the season, starting week 5, because that's the other thing. These numbers will fluctuate greatly from week 5 on. There is no guarantee that they're going to stay where they're at. For example, you may see a team drop up and down numerous times. A loss at the end of the season could dramatically change this. Because remember, second level points factor into it as well. So if Douglas wins their 10th game of the season and they weren't counting on Damani Ranch knocking off Minogue, they could get some second level points they weren't anticipating. So that would be very important that these things are all in place. Nothing is going to be left to the last minute. There cannot be. This has to be preset, predetermined. If we could even set it at the June board meeting, that would make me even happier, because then we would know who these people are and we could start immediately getting that information to them as this progress began.
No, thanks for clarifying all that. I have just like 1/2. I think I can throw it into one thing. When it comes to, like in the other sports, we have regionals, we have those pieces in place, as well as we have a separate 4A and 5A. So if my understanding is correct, with this updated system, with this realignment, we don't have a distinguished 4A and 5A during the regular season. And we also don't necessarily have a regional play round. Is that correct? Am I looking
No.
at that correctly?
You are, and that's not uncommon. We have that often throughout the course of our athletic year. If there is no comparable 5A north to south, there is no region championship awarded. For example, golf, the regional championship, there was no 5A regional golf championship because the South is the only region that participates. They technically go straight into a state championship. So any sport that competes in a geographical location against only the schools in the geographical location, there is no regional championship awarded. That started occurring when we went to sport by sport alignment and not north-south alignment between 5A and 4A. So that is a change. It is something different. However, that does not preclude any school from having a league championship within the league that they play in. It's just not recognized as an NIAA league championship, which we've never recognized league championships, only regionals and state. So that would be a difference and would be a change, but it is not unprecedented.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jackson. I'll have discussion points later. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson, to follow up on that too, we don't currently have a Southern and Northern region champion in 1A, 2A, or 3A football because they cross bracket for their state semifinals. So that is straight into a state tournament.
Ms. Riddle?
Oh, shoot, I forgot I had my hand up now at this point. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Bart said, because from what I recall, coming in as the new parent in that position, we were thrown into the realignment process and kind of shocked. And the system, everybody keeps saying that it was so, why are we changing this now? And from what I recall, it really was just supposed to be a temporary fix. And I just want to thank you all for coming up with, this system, I like this so far, what you've come up with, because we did ask, a few of us sent the directive back to realignment committee. We don't want four state champions for that, for just the 4A, 5A or whatever you want to call it, 1, 2, and 3. We wanted to try to narrow it down so that the championships meant more. And I think you guys have done, in my opinion, a great job. And I don't know, a lot of other people could have put together something. This point system seems a little bit complicated. I guess I'd have to get used to it, but you guys did a great job. And I think it's just because you have a real understanding and grasp of what needs to be done to try to make it more fair. And as far as people saying that, there will be less schools making the playoffs, that's literally the point of it, of the championship is, a little bit more of a narrowing down. 20 schools having the opportunity to have a postseason out of, I don't remember what it is, roughly 50 is still a lot of schools that will have the opportunity, to play for a state championship and keep up their school spirit and build a rapport with the community. So that's my only comment for now. I think Ms. Brockett asked my only other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Henneman?
One question. Well, we have two questions. The first question is about the point system. What's going to happen when we play like an independent school? So we know there's a couple teams out there that play independent schedule. How do those points work out? Because they're not a 3A, a 4A, 2A, 5A, whatever.
Regardless of their status as independent, they would still be aligned based on their enrollment number. So an independent school would still have an enrollment number that they're based on. Remember, 1A, 2A, and 3A are all enrollment based. So if they're an independent school, they have an enrollment based number. So they would still have that. The same would be said for any school coming in at the 4A. They would have had an enrollment based number. We can assess that number and then we can tabulate it as it's attached. So if Dave Henneman High School decides to join the NIAA and they're playing an independent schedule, Dave Henneman High School was given a 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A enrollment-based ranking based on our regulations, and we would utilize that to assess their point value. Now, if they play as a 3A school and go down and play some 8-man football, that's worth no points anyway, so that wouldn't factor it in, but then we would be able to assess the point value that way.
Okay, and second one is, I know this has like the 46 schools that are playing this year in 4A and 5A. I know like the charter schools, there's 3 of them that are gonna be bumped up to the 4A, 5A. Like, was there anything like putting I know it's hard because they played a 3A schedule this year, so they don't really factor in with the point system. Just like many of the 4As just played 4A with an occasional 5A 3. But yeah, if you're just wondering, because I know Slam, Matter East, and Sloan Canyon are all gonna be coming up to the 4A level next year. So is there any talk about where would they fit in this system? And I know Sloan Canyon just played a partial schedule because they were independent, and it's tough to get at the end of the season. I understand like the troubles they had trying to find games because they were independent. Everybody was playing league games at that time.
We used the current the current alignment system for this example. That's where
Okay.
this, so there was no, we did not look at Slam, we did not look at Sloan, and we did not look at Mater. We looked at only the schools that are currently aligned in the 4A/5A 1, 2, and 3. Because it is an actual snapshot of what's going on right now. Or I shouldn't say it's an accumulation of what's going on right now. We did not go that deep into that because this was the sample we provided.
Yeah, one other thing is I noticed like El Dorado way down here at like 36, and they're playing in a league final this Friday night. So that's looking at a team like that turned it on at the end of the season.
Correct. And if you
Great
look at their
job.
Harbin points, you would also notice that the league in which El Dorado played, they beat up on each other quite a bit.
Yes.
And their Harbin points then accumulate in a different manner. I think Bart brought up a very good point that the leagues would be different in the sense that the reason they would have to be different is that schools beating each other up, what they're doing is they're doing this to each other and they're fluctuating up and down. So that when you throw in the strength of schedule, you will see that the strength of schedule for El Dorado was 50. Their schedule, and I'm not trying to disparage El Dorado, I'm just simply reading the numbers. The strength of schedule for El Dorado was less, and that factored into where their ranking was. Whereas if you look at Mojave, which is up here sitting here, their strength of schedule was, and for Max Prep's ranking, had them at 22, but their Harbin points had them at 5. So the schedule in which Mojave played, their league and their non-league schedule, warranted them some major points. They accumulated some points that helped them offset the 22. One thing I want to make sure we stress on this is the reason we're looking at all 3 of these is because all 3 of these have a hole in them somewhere that the other system covers over. And that's the key here. It's an overlapping system that does not allow one system to manipulate where you're at. The rubric score that we have right now in the NIAA that we're using to align into the next season is a snapshot in reverse. I call that, we all know it, it's the Silverado effect. Silverado ran off. If you look at Silverado's football schedule or their football record for the last 3 years, correct me if I'm wrong, Bart, I believe they're 28-10 or 28-9.
Two of those years, they basically ran the table.
2 years they ran the table. And then they got moved into another division and all those kids have graduated. This helps alleviate that factor. That because it's not what you did last year, rear view mirror. It's what you're doing now. It's who you're playing, how you're playing, and how strong the schedule is that you're playing. So that's very, very indicative. One of the comments I was given by the question was, yeah, but the schools we played, they weren't that good. Okay, well then your non-conference, you would want to strengthen your schedule. And there are teams, and we can account for this as well. There are going to be teams in this system that may have a 9-0 record and not qualify for the playoffs. It's a common occurrence in some systems because the strength of schedule wasn't there. Because what we're looking at is this. You take a Reed High School who plays a solid schedule, may go 7-2, as opposed to say I'm just caught my glance, a Centennial High School who could play, you know what, we're just gonna play all 3A schools. That's it. We're going to play 3A schools. We're going to go undefeated. We're going to have a great season. Our kids are going to be excited. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a wonderful experience. And we're going to amass a lot of victories. But we also understand that we may not make the playoffs with this schedule. So the schedule itself becomes very valuable as well. You schedule those tougher teams, you play those tougher schedules, whereas currently, not only does the NIAA align you, the NIAA then tells you you need to play these schools as well. And that's playing for a slot on a line. Those of you that have been around long enough can remember that the original rubric that we used would reward schools for making it into the postseason at a weighted number. And that was before we had tweaked it. We had schools that were winning a league and being placed at the top of a line in one side of the geography. And then we had schools that were beating each other up, and it was one team getting that line, and the other three were probably stronger. This takes that into effect, and it's the old Northwest. If you were to look at the old Northwest and apply this 10 years ago, I do believe Centennial, Arbor, and Shadow Ridge, which would play for those spots, you would see them as the three stronger teams coming out of the entire state because they played a strong schedule. They played good football against good teams within their own division, and the max preps ranking would reward that schedule for being strong. It would then balance. That's what we're looking for here. Is we're looking for a balance that shows you playing well, we're playing a hard schedule, and our opponents are playing a hard schedule as well, and we get that equitable line across the board. Is it perfect? No. But my hope is that it covers all three of the aspects that we need it to cover clearly.
Yeah, Mr. Jackson, I'm sorry, Mr. Henneman, go ahead.
Yeah, and I know one thing is looking at, okay, as an AD or a coach, as I'm trying to build my schedule, say, you know what, I have a chance this year. I'm going to go and try to find some stronger opponents. And then you look at it like you'd have the Silverado effect, like, oh yeah, we scheduled Silverado. We beat them this year, but then all of a sudden you look, they didn't win a game. And so you don't get as many points that way. It's give or take any way you go. So I just want to put that out there too. People think about is you could think that you're going to have a strong opponent, and then that could be like a down year for them.
Mr. McNaught.
Colin McNaught, Region 4. First of all, Tim and Bart and the Realignment Committee, I want to thank you. I know that there's a lot of work put into creating this, so I appreciate that. With that being said, I'm going to stand here in complete opposition to this. Once again, I'm back for more opposition here. And I want to just phrase my comments with this question. I think when we think about what is our goal of high school sports, right? And my opinion is that the goal of high school sports, right, is to allow kids to play, to have fun, and to further engage in schools, right? And I think I don't believe that it's necessary. It's not about winning championships, and it's not a question of is 7 too many, is 6 too many, or is 5 the sweet spot number, right? I mean, if you think back to kids who won the state championship last year, I do not believe that any of those kids, whether they won 5A1, 5A2, 5A3, in 20, 30 years are going to look back and regret the fact that they won one of 7 state championships versus one of 5. And so I think it's something that I really want to stress here, that if we need to be, in my opinion, about providing opportunities for kids to play, to have fun, and to find success. And I think the decision here to move us to this kind of playoff structure does exactly the opposite of that. I'm going to start by saying that I know I speak for all CCSD principals when I say we are in complete opposition to this, which is 65% of the list in front of you today. So 65% of the schools on this list, in my conversations with high school principals, are not in favor of this. We heard some of them today. We had a high school principals meeting last week, and that was loud and clear from the high school principals that we are in complete opposition of this plan. I want to make an equity point because I think it really echoes the point that I made earlier with the one-time transfer, which is going to be a bigger issue with this decision here today. All right, so I would just like the Board of Control to hear the list of schools that are in each of these categories, right? So first, the schools that will make the playoffs. Of the bottom free and reduced lunch schools in Clark County School District, the lowest socioeconomic schools, there are 2. It is Mojave and it is Las Vegas. And I'm just going to stick to Clark County for a minute. The remaining schools from Clark County School District that can make it, and I would like everyone to hear the list of names: Coronado, Shadow Ridge, Green Valley, Legacy, Liberty, Desert Oasis, and Foothill. Want to let that. Now, if we look at the bottom of this list, The schools that frankly have almost no chance of making the playoffs in the long run, especially with a one-time transfer that can take the good players from these schools. There are 11 schools that are in the bottom percentage of free and reduced lunch schools from the Clark County School District. And I'd like to read those to you. Desert Pines, Cimarron Memorial High School, Canyon Springs, El Dorado, Cheyenne, Sunrise Mountain, Bonanza, Western, and Rancho. The decision here to box out these schools from the playoffs, I think negatively impacts what our goals should be as a board of control, which is to provide our students opportunities to play, to find success, and to have fun. How are we going to keep students at these schools when they know that there is no chance of them making the playoffs in the future? And opening the door with the one-time transfer, circling back to my opposition from earlier, right? Any player from this school who is strong, who wants to find success, is going to leave this school and is going to transfer to a school that they know are going to be in those top 20 schools consistently. Because frankly, this list is not going to change much over time, in my opinion. I do not believe it's going to change much. And I definitely don't think the top 4 are going to change very much, right? Because the top 4, 3 of the 4 have the state of Nevada as their zone, right? So again, I'm speaking from Clark County School District's perspective, high school principals, there is a collective disagreement. 65% of the schools on this list do not agree with it. And I just, again, want to push and make the point that we are creating an even bigger equity issue than we already have. The haves and have-nots comment, you heard it from a lot of my colleagues. It is incredibly clear here. And I hope that you heard like the list of schools that are in that bottom group, right? That we are taking away their ability to be in the playoffs with this decision here and with moving in this direction. Do I believe there are other options? Absolutely, right? But I think the conversation we're having here today, my biggest push is saying no to this and allowing a different proposal to come forward, right? Again, what is the goal of high school sports? To allow our students to be successful. And I believe that when we push this back to the realignment committee to say 7 was too much, I believe that's an adult problem, not a kid problem. I don't believe there is a single kid in the state of Nevada that is concerned about the fact that there are 7 state championships. I believe it is an adult problem and we should not let it impact kids. So again, I will continue, I'll come back in the queue and continue to further this point, but this decision will negatively impact our highest need students and our highest need schools. So I'm gonna ask that this committee reconsider, or this board reconsider moving this forward for all the reasons that I outlined. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Mr. Polson.
Thank you, Tim. Hey, and thanks to the realignment committee for going out and putting something together from what happened in our last Board of Control meeting. I appreciate all the hard work and effort. It's never an easy task or an easy duty to come up with something like this. I did have a question, Tim. If at the beginning you said the top 4, if the top 4 teams was to play for a state championship, and then you take the other 16 teams underneath that to number 20 there, and you have a 4A tournament from from those 16 teams. What if you was to take the top 8 teams on the rubric here, and if you went to Shadow Ridge, and if you took the top 8 teams and made the 5A out of 8 teams, would you then take 16 teams? Are we set at the 20 number, or would you bring that down and say, okay, we're going to still bring in 16 teams? And so we would go to like 24 on the list there and have the 4A as that. Is that an option from year to year, or are we pretty set on the 20 team thing?
I can tell you we've had long discussions about that, Bart and I and other people. We've had that long discussion. I can tell you that the 20 for me, and the reason I'm bringing forward the 20 is a hard number because at that point we can then look at seeding out a tournament, and we're seeding out the tournament, Wade, on a sense of these are the teams competing. The argument then becomes, well, if you go to 24, why don't you go to 36? It doesn't change it. or 32. 32 really doesn't change it. It's the same number of brackets. And then we continue to go down that. I think we need to set the hard number at 20. I think 20 is a good number. I also don't think we should set the number as 8 has to go into 5A and 14 have to go, or excuse me, 12 have to go into the 4A, because I think we need to look at it as it comes in at the end of the season as to see where that is and what is the competitively best brackets to put these schools into. That's why I'm at 20. I think 20 is a good number. I think 20 is a solid number, because no matter what number you pick, the number below it is not going to be happy. I'm not telling you Carson would not have sent their letter if they were setting it number 17. They probably still would. But I tell you, when you see that line drawn, you start to look at it and you say, oh, gosh, I'm only 0.033 away. I could have been there. You should just take it down. I think we set a hard line for that and we move it that way. That's where the number 20 comes from. I think that it allows for the buys if we need them. It allows for a good competitive balance and a good competitive postseason. Remember, this is about postseason. There were a couple things that were stated I was going to circle back on, but I guess I will. Mr. McNaught said that the goal of high school sports is allow students to play, have fun, and experience some success. My question is this: is the only determiner for success for our association accumulating and amassing in the postseason? If that's the case, we really need to work on our regular season as well, because we don't have more divisions in any other sport. We have the same number, with the same number of players and the same number of opportunities for kids. And I'm not saying that a student coming back 20 years from now is not going to say that state championship doesn't matter, because when we had 3 divisions, it was different as well. And I guarantee you that student at Moapa Valley who played in the 70s coming back looking at that 3A or 2A or whatever state championship, they earned that state championship and they earned it under the system that they were playing under. And I think there was value in that. So I always want to make sure we're always cognizant of success and how we assess it, and how we're assessing it across the board is very important. Mr. Whipperman, your hand's been up for a while. I apologize.
No worries. Thanks, Tim. Sorry, I'm in the car on the way to another meeting. First of all, Tim, I do want to recognize that I know that the committee, the realignment committee, and you in particular do care about kids and want to do what's
Mr. Whipperman, you're breaking up very badly. We've kind of lost you. Ms. Riddle, I'll come to you and we'll come back to Mr. Whipperman when we get him back.
I'm sorry, Tim, did you just say that it was okay for me to speak?
Yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and talk. I think we've lost Mr. Whipperman.
Okay, sorry about that. I think you actually just said one of the points that I wanted to make. When we said football is really like one of the only sports where we have like
say that in my comments. Almost unanimously opposed in the South.
Is he still talking? I'll wait.
I don't think he realizes we can't hear him because he's coming through every 3rd or 4th word. He's remuted. Go ahead, Ms. Riddle.
Sorry. Okay. I was just going to say or reiterate, I think you had just made that point where it's like isn't football the only sport that has this many state championships?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like we want to make it a little bit more of an honor, even just to even make the playoffs. I think there's still value in even just doing that. I mean, back in the day, from all my friends that grew up here and played here, that was a big deal to be able, to win your division or make the playoffs. Like, and there's no one's taking away any student's opportunity to compete. Every single team on this, on this chart or roster or whatever has the ability to move up or down, based on whatever they put into it. It's just the postseason that we're looking at to try to make it just a little bit more competitive. And I think that the other thing that I really like about this is, with the 5A championship at the top, we keep talking about teams having to compete with zone schools having to compete with no zone schools, it kind of fixes that problem too, where we know we usually have, one team that kind of beats everybody every single year, and some other teams that have a little bit better chance, maybe because they could similarly take advantage of some of the things they have access to and compete with them as well. I think that solves that other problem as well with the way that you've come up with this. So again, like this is the only sport that has that many championships. And I think you guys did a great job at solving a couple issues.
Ms. Brockett?
I think my colleagues were up before me. Did you want to try Mr. Whipperman again to see if you can get him?
I apologize. I'm just looking at them alphabetically. Yeah, sure. Mr. Whipperman, are you available?
Hey, Tim, can you hear me now better?
We got you. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate you.
All right. So first of all, Tim, I wanted to recognize that you and the committee did a great job. And I know you really are all looking out for the best interest of kids. So I appreciate that. I did want to point out a couple things. One, notice, and this is to Deanna's point, notice that 3 of the 4 top schools are private schools that don't have the same rules as the rest of us. I also similarly agree that an 0-9 team or a 1-8 team like I was for a couple of years should not be making the playoffs. I agree with that. I just don't know. I think this really hurts some of our lower socioeconomic schools that even having a chance from the time this thing goes from the jump. So I just wanted to reiterate, Colin did a really good job speaking to the feeling of the principals in the South and saying that they unanimously would prefer to stay where we are now than going to this new system at this point. And I do also want to point out that a team could choose to really, if they wanted to, which I guess could happen anywhere, they could manipulate the system such that they're not in that open division, that they come in, let's say, 8th or 9th, based upon people that they play. So, but again, I do want to give credit to the realignment committee for running with the what we did give them, and I appreciate the work that they did. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Keith. Colin?
Tim, not for I believe that I don't know, maybe my point wasn't clear. I am not advocating that high school sports is about making the playoffs. I am advocating that high school sports is about providing opportunities for kids to find success, to have fun, right? And ultimately to be invested in school. And my point is that the schools at the bottom of this list, we are going to see kids. I mean, frankly, kids come out because they want to have the chance to be successful and they want to have the chance to be in the playoffs. Kids will not come out for sports in the schools on the bottom of this list because they will know that they never have the chance to make the playoffs. And I understand that some schools can advance, but the fact of the matter is that they are not going to be able to advance because kids are not going to show up for sports, which flies directly in the face of what we should be doing here, which is trying to provide opportunities for our students. And I really want to encourage this committee. Let's not forget about the kids in our highest need area. And by moving forward with this, we are boxing them out of playoff potential, but ultimately the motivation to come out and play a sport because they will know that they do not have the opportunity to be successful at the end of the season. And that I believe very strongly is the reality here. And so I really don't want it to be misunderstood that I am not arguing here because Cimarron Memorial High School deserves to make the playoffs every single year. And I want to make sure that the students at Cimarron Memorial High School believe that they have the opportunity to make the playoffs and will ultimately come out for sports and ultimately be more invested in academics at school and academic success. By making this decision, we are going to leave behind our lowest socioeconomic group of students and basically say, we're going to worry about the group at the top. Good luck to the group at the bottom. And I think it's incredibly disheartening to feel like that's the direction that we as an organization want to go. I do not believe that 7 state championships is a problem. I don't think it's a kid problem. It's an adult problem. Why are we trying to solve an adult problem and hurting kids? And that is, I believe I am speaking from a large majority, if not all, high school principals in Clark County School District in believing that.
Thank you. Ms. Brockett?
Thank you. So, Mr. Jackson, I really do appreciate your system. I'm a numbers person too. So I really, when you first proposed the rubric and looking at how to really take advantage of the systems that we have out there in order to figure out where would people really fall, I appreciate that you figured out a formula so that can stay consistent. As complicated as it is, it's still something that we can stay consistent. We can keep it equitable in that sense of making sure that everybody knows where they fall. I do appreciate that. One thing I would love for us to consider really is to split up a 5A and a 4A. And I'm going to go to numbers because, again, I'm a numbers person. I know that my colleagues have talked about our FRL schools. And yes, I am at one of them. And I want to say thank you, Mr. Henneman, for shouting out El Dorado. I really appreciate that because we can use all the shout outs that we get, and our, Coach Tootle is going strong, and I really appreciate him and everything that he's done for the program, and he's continuing to grow the program. But I'm going to speak on to the point of safety. Because when we're talking about schools that right now are in 4A competing against schools in 5A, it is not equitable in terms of safety. So what I had looked at was I looked at the numbers of participants in football programs. So from freshmen to seniors, all football participants. And in looking at it, we have in this list of 4A and 5A schools, and granted, this is mostly in Southern Nevada, we have a program that has over 200 students within their football program. And it varies all the way down to a program with 25 students. 25 students. You talk about an injury, somebody ineligible, it's not safe. We have programs within, again, this 4A and 5A list. And granted, most of the programs that I'm going to speak of right now are on that FRL list also. And this is just kind of the effect of what happens in schools, again, based on the numbers. We have schools that have one level of football. So there is no development in playing competitive football at a freshman level, at a JV level. They go straight to varsity. So you're talking about possibly freshman babies playing against juniors and seniors. So 14-year-olds playing against potentially 18-year-olds. That is a huge developmental difference. Huge. Not only in terms of the way we control ourselves, but the way that we're built, right? And all the development that happens in the meantime, from the weight room to, the training to et cetera, okay? A lot of our programs, about half, I'd say in this list, when you look at 4A and 5A, it's maybe about 60-40%, where you have schools that have two developmental programs. So they'll have either a freshman team and a varsity team, or a JV team and a varsity team. I am at a school that has, for the last several years, we've really only had a varsity team. This year, we've actually had a JV team. So we've had a chance to allow our younger players to get the experience in the exposure, but it's still not to the same level as some of these other programs that have over 100 students. So again, where I'm at El Dorado, right now, total rosters, JV and varsity, we have 54 students, 54. You could look at some of these schools that are within this list, more than likely towards the top of the rankings on this list, that have 54 students on their varsity roster alone. So what I'm looking at is, again, I'm good with the rubric. Rubric's good with me, but I'm looking at creating, again, that competitive balance that we talked about, that we want to see in our football ranking system. And can we look at, and I'm sorry if you disagree with me about like having 3 5As. I'm good with 1 5A personally, right? And a 4A, but distinguishing who is 5A and who is 4A. So we don't have people also, teams that will try to compete for their points, right? Gaming the system, competing for points, having a school that has like over 150 participants, 3 levels of football, competing against a school that maybe only has a varsity team or just a varsity and JV team, where again, you have these young babies playing against potentially 17, 18-year-olds. that just does not create a fair competitive balance. So just something to think about.
Thank you. Mr. Stallworth?
We have turned this athletic organization into a we are the world. Let's make everything just good and dandy and pleasant. And that's not the world we live in. We are the NIAA that runs the athletic portion of the state's system for our youth. And I know the biggest difference here is that Clark County is in a different spectrum than all of us. Most of our counties and people that we deal with in our organization in this group deal with one or two schools in their county. Clark County is a different beast altogether. And the closest thing to it is Washoe County. We have our Hug High Schools of the world that has won 1-2 football games in the last 13, 14 years. We have our issues here, and our issues are the same, Colin, that you guys have in Vegas. But I think we're talking about something a little different here, because the reality here is that this meeting is specifically talking about how are we going to handle our best football teams going forward in a football championship series. We're not talking about regular season and how teams participate in athletics on every sport during their regular league play. And there's a big difference between those two, because the have-not schools that you're talking about was a school that I taught and coached at for 25 years. And the reality here is that every day I went to practice, I knew I was never making the playoffs. But the reality here is that that's another conversation and another meeting where what do we do with those schools as we move forward? And I don't think that we can really have a real good conversation about what do we do with our elite playoff schools and how do we reward them? And then how do we give our underachieving schools the opportunity to compete and get better during the course of the regular season? And those are two different conversations. And I really think we can address that other issue. Christina hit on it a little bit, and I appreciated that is, there's a 4A, there's a 5A. We can do something with that 4A that we have done. I think we've kind of done that with Vegas a little bit in terms of giving them their own little space to do kind of whatever they want to with that group. We don't have that luxury in Washoe County. But I think we're getting off task a little bit, because the task here is to find a playoff system for the football programs right now. And we can easily solve this by saying, hey, look, let's just make sure we do football like we're doing all the other sports, and let's move forward. But there was a lot of work and effort put forth in this. If you look at this, I can't see the bottom of the list here, but who is the last school there at the bottom? 46. So out of 46, I mean, how many schools total are there on this? Are there 46 total schools or 86? How many are on this total list? I can't hear you, Tim.
I'm sorry, 46.
46 total schools, and we're talking about having 20 of them go to the playoffs? There's 20% of your teams going to the playoffs? Guys, that's a lot. I think if you look at other states, that percentage is higher than most other states. 20 out of the 46 going to the playoffs? When I started coaching here in '85, you won your league and you played for the state championship the next week. It was North against South. Whoever won the league, so there wasn't any playoff games. There was one state championship. Everyone else was done. Now, fast forward to 2024, we have 20 teams going to the state playoffs, and some of those teams took third and fourth place in their region. I mean, we are putting a lot of schools in the playoffs. Now, if we want to do something with that bottom 46 to 21, we can go ahead and do a We Are the World Championship playoff group for them too as well. But understand, our goal and mission here is to set up a process in which we award our top teams in each division that we play with a championship. That's what the goal is first. That's
Thank
it.
you, Rollins.
My box.
Excuse me. I apologize. Okay, go ahead, Colin.
With respect, Rollins, I believe one impacts the other. So I do believe that this decision here impacts the regular season, the kids participating, because kids will see it as they don't have the opportunity to ever find success, right? And so I think I hear what you're saying, and I understand what our mission is here today. But with that being said, I think that one thing does cause the other here, right? And so, Ms. Sloan, I would like to make a motion if you would entertain that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think in the name of the following schools, I'm going to make the following motion. So I'm going to read the names of the schools that this motion is in support of. Rancho High School, Valley High School, Hug High School, Western High School, Bonanza High School, Worcester High School, Sunrise Mountain High School, Del Sol High School, Cheyenne High School, Silverado High School, El Dorado, North Valleys, Cadence, Clark, Canyon Springs, Chaparral, Sierra Vista, Sirma Memorial, Palo Verde, McQueen, Desert Pines, Basic, Durango, Spring Valley, Centennial, and Carson. In an effort to allow them to be part of a playoff structure or a competitive balance structure that is equitable, I'm going to make the following motion to, I motion to reject the proposal presented here today from the Realignment Committee.
Thank you. We have a motion to reject the realignment.
This is Keith Whipperman. I second.
We have a first, we have a second. Any further discussion, comments? I would also like to just bring forth that the Board of Control, when we last met, we told the Realignment Committee, we had said that 7 was too many. And I know the proposal you have in front of you is for 5 classifications for 4A playoff and 5A playoff. Has anybody taken in consideration to potentially look at 6? Because we just said 7 was too many. Mr. Jackson, have you considered that in your proposal?
Yes, Ms. Sloan, I did, and I rejected it, and Bart and I had that conversation, and when the realignment committee, remember, I don't have a vote with the realignment committee, and I don't have a vote with the board. So when the board sent it back to the realignment committee, the committee then asked our staff to come forward with this, with a proposal. Our staff came with the proposal. Remember, at the beginning of this, I said there was a concerted effort to be aligned across the board with all of our other sports that have 5 divisions and having 5 state championships. I still stand by that. I believe 6 is too many. I've said that before. I've been accused of saying, using my position as the executive director carrying too much weight. I do not agree with that. I believe that the opinion was asked, the answer was given. At the same point, I do believe that the proposal put forth does allow for that. Again, what we are hearing right now is that we want more representation in the postseason. That's what's being equated to success. And I do not agree with that. I do not believe that success is measured by the postseason. I agree with Mr. McNaught that success is our students walking across the stage. I do believe that that is success, and I will stand by that forever. I do not know where we would go at this point with 6. I know that there are other proposals that have been rejected that had 7, and that we now have one with 5. Once again, if we were to go to 6, we would still be looking at a system that would involve more schools in the postseason, which we've discussed ad nauseum today about whether or not we should be that deep or not. But I have given this a lot of thought and talked with staff, and as we've proposed it, we believe 5 is the correct number.
Madam President,
Yes, sir.
I would like to add that staying with the present format is still not going to address those schools that Colin mentioned.
Thank you, Rollins. I didn't want to bring that up, but I'm going to bring up some information that I think we should share. Over the last 2 years, so the 2 years that we've been under this alignment, if you went into the postseason, regardless of 4A, 5A, 1, 2, or 3, as a 6 or 7 seed, your combined record is 1 win with 21 losses and an average margin of victory of 35.38 points. No one has had any success in the 6 or 7 seed spot in the postseason based on those numbers. And the only school that has won any game was in a 5A1 division where Shadow Ridge upset Arborview 14-17, very competitive because it is at the highest competitive level that we have established. But the 2-year 4A total margin of victory has been 29.8. So what we have seen is the 6 and 7 seeds going in there are not experiencing success that we would anticipate with a bracket that is competitive across the board. Thank you, Rollins, for bringing that up. And I know the question is, or the comment's going to be that, well, they had the opportunity to go to the playoffs. And I understand that. And that's Mr. McNaugh's gesturing. I don't know if he wants the floor or not. So I will stop at that.
This is Wade Polson, Region 3. I know this is what we're considering a 5A, 4A issue in the larger metropolitan area and the larger schools across the state. But I just want to bring out a point. In the 3A and the 2A and the 1A, which I represent, the smaller classifications, in the 1A, there's 23 teams that play football. 8 of them make the playoffs. In the 2A, there is 16 teams from what Bart sent out. There are 16 teams in the 2A, and out of that, 8 of them make the playoffs. In the 3A, and I don't know how the rubrics comes out and how many teams that are on the list here are dropped down into the 3A, but there's 18 from what Bart sent out currently, but I know there's some 4A schools that would be put into that. And I believe 8 make the playoffs. So when we start talking about making the playoffs and everything, if you go by percentages, less than 50% obviously go to the playoffs in all the other classifications. What makes the 4A and the 5A more important than the 3A, 2A, 1A, in the sense that more teams get to make the playoffs? When you start talking about underprivileged, come out to rural Nevada. There's a lot of underprivileged out here in rural Nevada, and so those kids, and in all classifications, you got teams that are quitting or not playing football or not being competitive because of football. So do we start to add for that? We're not talking about 3, 2, or 1A because it's enrollment based. And I know there's more dynamics, but I think there has to be something said to be making the playoffs. And as with this rubrics that we have here and what has been presented, 20 out of 46 are going to make the playoffs. That's a pretty high percentage, as Rollins points out. And I think that's a good number. And I appreciate what the realignment committee has done. This is tough. This is hard. And football has always been different than all the other sports. And I don't know why. It's just another sport. We just asked the realignment committee to bring it back into balance with what we've been doing with all the other sports. We don't have more state championships in soccer. We don't have more state championships in basketball, baseball, volleyball. It's all the same. So why is football an exception with getting kids to come out and to play or to be competitive? It's the same thing. It's a sport. And so our job from the NIAA is to make sure that competitiveness is there and that the kids, and I'm all about the kids. I've been a coach in 3 different sports for a long time, and I know what competitive balance is. And as a coach, you want to get better and you want to build. And anyway, I think that's important, and I agree with what's being presented here. So that's just my 2 cents.
I would also like to know, I know that we have some liaisons around the table that are on the realignment committee. If any of you would like to speak up in regards to this proposal.
Sloan, Ms. Habig had her hand up a while ago. I don't know if she's still here.
Tammy, yes, she's still here. Go ahead, Tammy.
I'm still here. My comment was actually going to be more so as a member of the realignment committee, more so than as a liaison. Like Wade said, we didn't have a lot of guidance. We were told, go back and don't bring us back 7 state championships, is really what we were told. I've been listening for 2 hours. There's a lot of good on all sides. There's a lot of good that's been said. I don't think that any system we bring to the table that the board approves is going to make everyone happy. It's not. We have to do, as we said, what's best for kids. I know everyone remembers we did send the current, what we have currently, to the board. And we were told no. So this was the next step to try to say, we want to keep it competitive. We want to, what's the right word? But also not have every single team in the playoffs. So I think that's the part that I'm struggling with, because I don't necessarily disagree that this does hurt the schools at the bottom. I 100% agree, but it's not just Clark County schools at the bottom either. There's schools from up north that are at the bottom as well. And I think that being at the bottom's hard. It's hard to build, and it's hard to struggle and get better. But I also don't think a team that's 0-12 has any business being in the playoffs. 0-11, whatever. If for some reason this doesn't pass, just as a member of the realignment committee, we need more direction than just something different. And I think that that's probably where, sorry, my phone was ringing. I think that's where a lot of my frustration is coming in, is we hear we don't like that, but we don't hear a whole lot else. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Tammy. Anybody else?
I see X.
Yeah, Mr. Anthium has his hand up. So does Mr. Levitt, Mr. Henneman.
Okay. Let's go to Bob Levitt and then Xavier.
Thanks, Ms. Sloan. Bob Levitt, 4A5A North. Liaison to the board, no vote. I think there's a couple of things, and I don't disagree with anything that's being said here. I think a real important consideration is to think about the fact that the approval of a playoff seeding system such as this would naturally require, and Tim alluded to it, redefining the leagues. And we're looking at numbers right now based on a 5A1, a 5A2, a 5A3, and a 4A. I think these numbers would be different if once leagues are redrawn to function under this. We've already had conversations here in the North with respect to what our current 6 and 6 would look like, 6 in our 5A2, 6 in our 5A3. And I just look at some names on here, and I'll throw Reno out. And I was athletic administrator at Reno High, and I'm not picking on Reno, but Reno had 1 league win this year, and then won a playoff game. Should Reno be on this list? I don't think you can make that determination based on these numbers, which are based on the current configurations of the leagues. And I think that's going to be a big factor as we have to redraw our leagues to function under a system like this. And I think things will look a little bit different because schedules are going to look quite different than they do right now. If you look at our 5A2 and our 5A3, you have a school that has 5 wins, 4 wins, 3 wins, 2 wins, 1 win, and 0 wins. Both leagues come out just like that. There's a top and there's a bottom. And that's just the way it is. So I just think that's something that needs to be considered, is these numbers are based on leagues that probably will look very, very different in the future if something like this were to be approved.
Thank you. All right, Xavier.
Thank you, Ms. Sloan. Xavier Anthem, a consultant for the Realignment Committee. And unfortunately, I see the same thing happening right now, is that we are in a rabbit hole and that we are hyper-focused on playoffs. And this is exactly what happened just recently with our Realignment Committee, is that the only thing that we were looking at is where we're at with playoffs. And to Bob Levitt's, Bob's got a little easier where they already got a great breakdown with their 6 and the 6 in the North. And for me, this is a Southern situation. I'm not saying this is CCSD by any means. Don't take that. This is a Southern concern. And I think a lot of our principals, if they saw how leagues were going to be drawn up, might look at things a little differently. Domingo, I love you. You know this. I love Gorman. And Gorman's been a great member of our association, but Open Division was created because of Gorman. And I think you've got a Division I league that doesn't want to always have to play Gorman. Before we went 5A Division I, our review didn't want to play Gorman because every time they would always be runner-up and wouldn't make the playoffs in the state championship. And so that elephant in the room, I think they were called a problem during realignment. Gorman always seems to kind of be the one that has kind of caused, because I hate to say this, and I'm going down the rabbit hole myself right now, and I apologize. Take Gorman out of this conversation, and we might look at, hey, let's just go 5A, 4A, and be done with it. Maybe we just go straight 4A, but we are where we are, and we're going to continue to move forward. I'm going to say this. I feel bad for Tim and Bart. The realignment team, as a team, didn't bring anything to the table. It was just kind of, hey, Tim, Bart, feed us. And it was up to realignment to say, hey, okay, we like this. Hey, we don't like this. And we just went forward. Nobody from the realignment team brought anything to the table. So that's kind of, I feel like it was a disservice to Tim and to Bart, as I think that should be something that is looked at. I'm going to jump on what Tammy said earlier. I think there is a concern that we have some schools that are 0-4 whatever and are making the playoffs. And that's not the great, because then you have a school that's really good playing against a team that's not very good, and they're playing again, and schools are running up scores. And just to get the rock clock running and to shorten that game, and that's another piece to it. I will say that Gorman has had a running clock in all of their games, and I mean no disrespect to Domingo and his group, as I know that they do a great job and are great for the association. And lastly, I know we got 46 on here. Do know that in the South that we'll have at least 3 additional schools with Sloan Canyon, Mater East, and Slam coming up. And, their numbers are going to be skewed a little bit in this mix as well. So I don't know. I'm just going to make this statement. Maybe you bring this back to the Realignment Committee. Realignment Committee members, everybody that's on there, come with a solution. Clearly, I know Colin and the principals have an idea. I think Antonio had something. Colin had something. Xavier's got something. Maybe we go back to the drawing board. I know that's not ideal with timelines, but hey, let's try to get it right instead of trying to force something down. So just my 2 cents.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Dave?
Hi, Dave Henneman, charter liaison. I agree that 7 is probably too many state champions. Great that you win a state championship, but think of 4A, 5A. But I also agree with maybe looking at maybe having a designated 5A and a designated 4A. And if we can set teams like that, and I know I talked to Tim, and he says him and Bart are looking at trying to come up with leagues that would be competitive. Like if we could see those leagues and say, all right, where do we sit at? Maybe make those leagues like 5A league, 4A league, like that's something that the realignment committee can look at too. Say, all right, well, we'll have a 5A league and 4A league because even the top 8 in the system right now, you put them in the playoffs and you have second 8, do 16. Maybe have 8 and a 5A, 8 and a 4A, 16 teams. Yeah, and I agree, not everybody should make the playoffs. It's not fun having to be a lower seed, and I've done that in other states where I'm the lower seed. I travel 6 hours across the state, get beat, 60 zip, get back on a bus, travel 6 hours back. Like, so we need to limit the number of playoff teams, but also try to make it even fair because I just know with the charter schools, we have that, and private schools have the double multiplier for enrollment. Now, granted, Bishop Gorman, Faith, Minogue, they're the elite. But I know with Sloan Canyon, us, Slam, Honor East, and Losi, you know, we sit that we fit great in the 4A as it is right now. And maybe have the 5A1, 5A2 be 5A and take the 5A3, split that in half. The upper half go to 5A, the lower half go to 4A. I don't know. But that's something that the committee could look at too. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm not in favor of it how it sits right now, but I think it could be, it's not easy change, but I know with the realignment committee, they were just forced, give us less than 7. And they did that.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, is there a reason why coming forth in the position in which we're at right now and the information that you shared that schools were not broken into leagues?
Ms.
And
Sloan, we have not broken them into leagues because we're still waiting to see if the board's going to approve this, and then we will break them into leagues. If we were to break them into leagues right now, it would be premature. And I think that what we are now right back where we were 2 years ago with where we're facing, with what we're facing. And 2 years prior to that, and 4 years prior to that. We have kicked this can around a lot. I'm going, as a non-voting member of both committees and the realignment, you have a motion on the floor. And I think that what we've gotten to, we've gotten to the point where if we're not going to approve this, then we need to move forward. I don't know what that will look like at this point, but if we are going to approve this, we need to move forward. Because at the same point, what we're discussing here now is, okay, we didn't like 7, we kicked it back. We don't like 5, we're going to kick it back for 6. When we bring it back with 6, if it were to come back with 6, the same arguments are going to be made based on the fact that we're going to say it has not addressed the issue that Mr. McNaught has fought for all day today about a success for the teams that are struggling, because whether we have 5 divisions, 6 divisions, or 7 divisions, there was no success for the teams at the bottom of that list of schools, whether you use the rubric, whether you used Harbin, or whether you used Max Prep's rankings. That's the concern that they've addressed, and I don't think that's going to be resolved in a system that comes back with 5, 6, or 7 divisions of football. I believe that's a different conversation, much like Rollins discussed. And Ms. Brockett brought up about how her coach has moved that program from 1 level to 2 levels. I think those are the discussions that need to be had there. I don't know if
President, Trustee Cavazos had her hand up. I just want to make sure that she gets an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Jackson, first of all, Mr. Jackson, were you finished?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Cavazos?
Thank you, Madam President. And I'm sorry, I've been really quiet. I'm trying to manage 2 meetings at the same time. I've listened to everyone, and something that really stands out to me is basically just kind of looking at what we define as success for our kids. And, you know, it's not always just calculated, but it's earned. And I think that this new system is attempting to do that. If I'm looking at this correctly, and I've been going back and forth, so I may have missed some of the discussion, but it seems like it mostly hurts the 4A and the lower level 5A3. And I don't call elephants in the room elephants. You know, I just come right out and say what I think. So when people are talking about the top 4 teams, we have a possibility here. Are we looking at something like Gorman could possibly end up playing just 4 league games and be able to schedule 6 out-of-state games? So, I'm looking at factors like that, trying to be fair. I think the realignment committee did the best that they could. And I'm really listening to what Bart and Tim have said on what they're trying to accomplish here. And having been on this board of control for some time, we did direct them to go back and come back with something different. However, and this is the big however, as we're looking at whether we could tweak this to make the current system a little bit better, I have to go back to what you said, Pam, on, why 6 would not work. It would not be 7, it would not be 5. But I think that Tim came back and explained his reasoning, his rationale on that. So I don't know. I know that there's an active motion on the floor, but I just, I can't completely go with this right now because I think there are some things that we could make better. And the thing that stands out to me the most is something that comes up on school board a lot too. We assign a subcommittee, we tell them we can't have this anymore. We need to have something different, make it better. And in this case, it's being more equitable and competitive. But how much input did we get? We have input from the principals. I have a lot of input from the principals, and it pretty much aligns with what Colin and Keith are saying. So I just have to wonder, did we give them enough direction? From what Tammy said, from what X said, it sounds like maybe it was a little bit muddy and there wasn't enough specific direction. And this left them in a bad spot. So that's where I'm at right now, because to me, it looks like they really worked hard on this. So I'll just leave it at that. Again, I think I might have missed a little bit of the discussion because I'm on 2 meetings. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any more discussion?
You've got hands up from Ms. Habig, Ms. Riddle, Mr. McNaught, and Mr. Stallworth all have hands up right now.
Okay, give me those names again in that order. We got Tammy, who else?
Ms. Habig, Ms. Riddle, Mr. McNaught, Mr. Stallworth.
No Stallworth.
Okay, no
All
for
right,
Mr.
go
Stallworth.
ahead, Tammy.
I guess mine is more of a clarifying question than mine is, because again, like I said, if this doesn't pass, I'm not married to this either. Like as a realignment committee member, I feel like it was supposed to be taken to the principals and it clearly wasn't. So I get that part, and I get that maybe they have a proposal, okay, all of those things. My clarifying question would be, because we've already voted to keep 3A enrollment protected, is there any way to expand the 3A? I don't know if that's a legal question. I don't know who that would go to, because I feel like that plays a lot into this as well.
The 3A has been board approved.
So there's nothing we can do to expand that? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Deanna? Ms. Riddle?
I'm sorry, I'm starting to lose my train of thought. We've been talking about this. I think Mr. Jackson already said it. It seems like ever since we joined this board, it seems like you guys were arguing this long before, at least I got here as a parent liaison. You'll be arguing it long after I leave, and Sean graduates this next year. Even if we send this back to the realignment committee, based on what Mr. Jackson said, based on what Bart said, I just don't see them coming back with much else different. I think that most of the problems that we worry about as far as like fairness, equity, competition, getting kids involved and excited about the season would be solved with the leagues, which they said they cannot do until we approve something. So we have a motion on the floor. Obviously, I'm not in agreement with Colin based on what we said. He said he doesn't want to approve this. I would lean more towards approving something like this and then solving the problems that the principals and everyone else seems to be had with the leagues. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you. Mr. McNaught?
Just a couple of quick things. I mean, everybody has heard my point on this. to your point, Ms. Riddle, I think that I don't think this problem is solvable once approved. I think that it just creates the issue that is not going to necessarily go away. We are going to limit these schools at the bottom from their ability to ever advance. I think it's worth noting that we have the maker of the motion from the realignment committee, Ms. Habig, telling us that she is not confident in the proposal that is in front of us today. So I just want to point that out, that where it came from, we have the person telling us, and maybe this isn't the strongest thing. That's at least what I heard, Ms. Habig. I don't want to quote you, but that's at least what I heard. And then I think just lastly, right, I would just encourage this group again to just to consider allowing teams the opportunity to be competitive. I'm not sure why we can't just have a conversation of splitting this group in half. Nobody is advocating, not a single high school principal is advocating for more teams in the playoff. We are simply advocating for more teams to have the opportunity to get into the playoffs to be competitive. Splitting this list in half might do that, right? But I recognize that there are teams on this list that wouldn't make the playoffs in the top group that would be upset about that. And so I think like that's, you know, definitely worth noting here. I'm going to just like implore this group to please not forget about our students in the lowest socioeconomic group.
Any other comments? Again, I don't see hands raised on my end.
Ms. Habig has her hand up. Mr. Fitzsimons just put his hand up.
Okay, Tammy? Ms.
I actually just forgot to lower mine last time.
Okay, we've got Mr. Fitzsimons and Ms. Brockett.
Okay, Sean?
Yeah, hello, Sean Fitzsimons, 2A, liaison of the board, non-voting member. I am on the realignment committee. If you look at this chart in front of us and you find Western, I don't know if Bart could look at Western. Western won 3 football games this year, I think. In the old system, I just want to point it out to the board, in the old system, Western would then be moved up to a larger classification. This proposal, I believe, if I'm looking at it right, and I think Bart Davis can attest to this, if this was in play this year, Western would not be automatically bumped up into a 5A Division 2 or 3 because we wouldn't have those classifications, but we would keep Western where they're at, and they want to compete against like-minded teams. I get that we want to get less than 7. I understand that. I understand all of it. Kids want to play against competitive teams. The Gormans, the Faiths, the Liberties, they want to play against competitive teams. Gorman does not want to play Western. They do not want to play Rancho. We learned our lessons 10, 15 years ago. Tim can tell you, Bart can tell you, when Desert Pines and Clark all of a sudden went down to 3A for basketball and went down for every sport, really. And there was some opposition from athletic directors and coaches. We don't want to have that 3A by our name. Well, guess what? Once banners started being more hung by those schools, the kids don't care what is by their name, 3A, 2A, 4A, Division 1. Remember we did that. So again, a non-voting member. I still feel that this could pass, and then you could designate with leagues, with principals, with ADs, and get it to more competitive balance with all the football teams. So the Westerns, the Ranchos, the Valleys, they're not going to play the upper echelon teams. And that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Brock?
Ms. Sloan?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want you to remember too, we also have once the schools are divided into their divisions, then the leagues can be formed. The manner in which those leagues are formed, the board has a regulation that allows for the flexibility in that. So they are not predetermined. There's discussion because we can go with 2 leagues, we can go with 1 league, we can go with 4 leagues, we can go with 6 leagues. That there is flexibility by regulation to allow that. So that's a key point to remember as well.
Thank you. Ms. Brockett? You're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Again, I just want us to consider again some of the safety factors, because we are talking about a collision sport where kids get hurt, you know, more often than not when you compare it to other sports. And when we're looking at participation rates of having 25 kids participate in the sport to 200 kids participating in this one sport in the same division, That's where I find definite inequities. And yes, they do tend to correspond with FRL levels. But again, looking at that safety component and having that competitive balance so that we don't have the programs that have over 150 kids competing against the programs that are barely holding on to 20, 30, 40 kids, because it does create an unsafe environment for those kids. They don't have the development that some of the other programs have. So again, if this does go back to the realignment committee, I just ask that you please think about those participation rates, the level of developments within the school, the program developments that the schools have, because that definitely weighs in on that in factor, which makes sense. If you have 3 levels where the kids are participating from freshman year against freshmen, etc., those are where your stronger teams are. Thank you.
Thank you. I do know, I was just contacted that we do have a public comment, so at this time.
Yeah, Miss Loney has not appeared in the room yet. I did send the Zoom link off a couple of minutes ago, but I have not seen him pop into the waiting room yet.
Okay, because I would like to take this to vote. I believe everyone has had time to speak. So,
If you wouldn't mind
We're
giving
voting
it
to
just a
reject
minute to
this,
say.
right?
I'm sorry, did somebody have something to say?
I'm so sorry, it's Deanna. I said we're voting to the vote is to reject what we have, right?
That is correct. That is the current motion. All right, is the individual still not there?
Still not here. And I would assume he was listening to this on the YouTube feed, which, as we heard earlier, runs just a little bit behind. It is not a principal. It is an athletic director at one of the schools. I just saw that comment in chat. I'm sorry, I'm stalling here trying to see if this person will show up, but he has not popped into the waiting room yet.
Okay, have you texted him or anything?
I emailed him the Zoom link within probably, let's see, the last 4 minutes.
Okay. How long should we wait?
Totally up to you on this, and with Mr. Anderson's feedback as well on that.
It's been 4 minutes, Paul. You're muted.
You know, it's up to you, Pam, as to what you want to do, but you know, I wouldn't wait too much longer.
No.
We've already been going a couple hours on this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I think Ms. Sorensen was trying to speak.
Okay, sorry, Ms. Sorensen?
Sorry, thank you. Just kind of looking at it from the rural perspective, because I know, like, looking at the 3A alignment, possibly bumping up rural Reno and North Paso, who have been playing up to 2A in football up to 3A. Neither of them would play up for the 2A. So if we ended up approving this, I mean, those schools can still appeal to the realignment committee to change their status for football. Is that correct?
Yes, the realignment we have the appeals meeting coming up in December for the North, December 3rd, Bart?
Placement meeting December 3rd, appeals meeting December 9th.
Thank you.
Bart, do you have any status on the speaker?
Still has not appeared into the waiting room.
It's been over 5 minutes.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, I would just ask, for the sake of time, we've been doing this for quite some time, that we just take it to a, I would like to do a roll call vote, Tia.
Pamela Sloan?
Wait, hang on. The motion is to reject the proposed realignment. All right, so that's on the table right now. Again, the motion is to reject the proposed realignment. Go ahead, Tia.
Pamela Sloan?
Yay.
Roland Stallworth?
Yes.
Linda Cavazos? Linda? I think she's unmuted.
Sorry, it's muted. I'm a yes.
Greg Malkovich,
Yes.
Jay Kenny,
Yes.
Colin McNaught,
Yay.
Christina Brockett,
Yes.
Wade Polson,
No.
Deanna Riddle,
Nay.
Rayanne Sorensen,
Nay.
Alex Woodley,
Yes.
Keith Whipperman.
Yes.
The yeses have it with 3 dissenting.
So with that said, Mr. Jackson, I'm gonna turn this back over to you. So where do we proceed from here, or Mr. Anderson?
Well, we don't have a realignment for the football. I don't know if you want it to go back to the realignment committee. That would be procedural, at which point they would make their determination at that point.
I would suggest that occur, the sooner the better. And I would also like the Southern principals that have spoken in opposition, that I encourage them to be in attendance at the next realignment meeting, so they can also be part of the dialogue and they could do some public speaking. So when it comes back to the board, we're all on the same page. And we're not going back and forth, back and forth. Does that have to, Paul, does that have to go any further than that? Or does that have to, can that just be the direction?
Well, I guess you can give direction as to this, where you want this to go, but I think it'd be better for the board to decide where it wants to go. And I think you can do that under this item. I mean, you've rejected this item. That means that where we are is at the former realignment. Is there an intent to stay with just the former realignment, or to try to come up with a solution? And you got to keep in mind that you've got appeals coming up and everything else. I don't know how you get all of this done by having a realignment committee meeting, another proposal coming forward, and the board deciding this prior to December 3. I just don't see that happening with the holidays and the open meeting law requirements and everything else. So I think you've kind of backed yourself into a hole where I don't know if you're just stuck with the old alignment or what.
Nope.
But up to the board to decide that.
Tammy, you have your hand up?
Yes. I know he was saying December 3rd. So last time when the group, I wasn't on realignment last time, but when this came up, it was pushed all the way back to, what was it, March? I think it was, for football, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So my only, like I said in my in my comment before, all of those things, we have to have some direction. Because, and like I said, I have been texting back and forth with some of the principals. I have no problem talking to them, bringing their proposal forward, all of those things. But we need some sort of direction, because 7, 6, 7, we're going on 6, 7 meetings now. And I know they did this last time. We don't want to keep doing that. We've already lost 2 people who resigned from realignment. I don't want to lose anybody else. And I know that there's people who are on that bubble of resigning because they want direction. And I'm not speaking just myself. I want direction too, but I know there's a lot of people who, we need more than just, we don't like this. We want more. Please, please.
Colin, do you have, since you've been very outspoken, do you have any guidance that you would like the realignment committee to have?
Well, I probably answered my question wrong. I should have been a nay, thinking that I voted wrong on that. I supported Tim Jackson's proposal over the alignment. I had a yes vote, thinking I was supporting it. So I'm sorry about that. I don't know if that changes anything. Does that? So sorry about that.
Ms. Long, to your question, number one, I think beginning of this meeting, I would highlight again that the comprehensive high school principals would like a vote on the realignment committee in order to be part of the more directly part of the conversation, not simply just able to speak for 3 minutes on in public comment at those meetings. So I definitely think that that's something that we should consider here. To give direction, I mean, I have no problem with the current setup, and I don't think we have time to come up with a new setup, frankly. And I think that what I believe that at our meeting in September, we should have just approved everything. I don't believe that we are in a place where we, especially at this point, where we can come up with a new plan that people are going to be happy with. But I don't hear many, if any, complaining about our current setup, specifically kids. And so I think with kids in mind, being focused on kids, I think only adults have the concern about 7 state championships, at least from what I have heard, right? So I think in the interest of helping the realignment committee, I would love to see a comprehensive principal with a voting membership to that realignment committee. I mean, I would point out that Bishop Gorman has a voting right, but no comprehensive high school principal has a voting right on the realignment committee.
I have my hand up. Can I speak? Sorry.
Yeah. Deanna, is that
I've definitely heard complaints from parents and kids. So to the opposite of what Colin said, that's why when I sat next to Wade at the last meeting, I asked that it changed. On a side note, Rollins, I was worried that some people were going to think that it was for it. And that's why I asked for clarification ahead of time.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I figured that's why I asked for that. Anyways, my only question or suggestion, because like I said, I feel like we're going to keep kicking the can down the road, is that I too, at least when I went over this with, because I talked to a couple different principals just to make sure that I understood maybe how leagues could make a difference, that I don't know, and I don't know if this is a question for Mr. Jackson then, is there a way, I know you said you didn't want to establish leagues. I do think that if people had it explained to them with, I don't know if you call it divisions or leagues or whatever, once I saw what that looked like, I was like, okay, this makes sense now. And to Miss Brockett's point, Miss Brockett, my son had a concussion. He's been playing football since he is 5. I'm constantly scared of those kids from the smaller schools getting killed on the field from Liberty. I'm like holding my breath. So again, like when I saw the division, I don't know if you call them like divisions or leagues or whatever, like how the schools could possibly be grouped, I was like, okay, this solves a lot of problems or issues in my mind. Again, back to the competitiveness, fairness, equity, making kids want to compete for the sport. I felt like that solved some of it and made sense to me. So is there a way that if you bring something back to us, that could be shown to us as a whole, Mr. Jackson, so that people can feel confident what they're voting on with the playoffs, you know, so that the two go in tandem?
This is going back to the realignment committee, so I think that would be the direction you give them. I'm not a member.
But I guess I'm not asking correctly. Can I ask them to do that?
Yes. Yeah, you can ask.
Okay.
Your board member.
That's what I would like to see, because once it was suggested to me, if you come up with the leagues, like how the schools would be grouped, so that we can vote on that along with this the next time, that would help, I think.
Mr. Anderson, is there an opportunity, would I be within my right to motion someone to the realignment committee? Or would that need to be agendized, and
That's not agendized.
Okay.
And that committee was created, several meetings ago.
Right,
you would
we
have
just
to,
added two. I just
I
wanted
guess,
to
put
clarify.
that on a future board agenda. That's
Okay.
not on this agenda.
Thank you for clarifying.
Done in a second.
Okay, so now we have the realignment has been rejected. So now it's going, the direction is to go back to the realignment committee. All right, so Mr. Jackson, you'll have to set a meeting with the realignment committee. And is there anything, any other clarifying things we as a board is asking the realignment to come back with? Are we still looking at 5 for postseason? We looking for 6 for postseason? I think that would help and assist the realignment committee.
Yes.
The pro,
I think the number would be beneficial. Rollins, did you have something to say?
yeah, I think that the realignment committee needs to have an open discussion, and Tammy might be able to help since she'll be able to bring this back, but to compare what Tim had presented to us today and go over that and have that conversation with them about comparing apples to apples, oranges to oranges, about number of teams in the playoffs, possibility of changing leagues and formats, and that kind of stuff, to have them kind of compare them side by side, and do something along that as they bring something back to the board.
I believe high school principals would be in, from Clark County School District, would be in favor of an alignment that included 6, open 5A, 4A. So I would be open to seeing something that looked like that was created a little bit more opportunity for all kids. So I think if we're not comfortable with 7, which frankly, I am not in that group of being, I voted against that last time. I am not in the group of being uncomfortable with 7. I think it breeds opportunities for kids to have good memories, good experiences, but open 5A, 4A would be my ask from Region 4.
Ms. Sloan, this is Paul.
Yes,
So
Paul.
where you are right now is basically you've rejected this proposal. All I think you should do is send this back to the realignment committee. Right now, your realignment for football is your prior alignment, unless the board chooses to change that. So if the board wants it to go back to the realignment committee, then I think that's the direction at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Pam. Sorry, Bart. Keith, this is Keith. Quick question. So when we were asked to go provide feedback at the realignment committee, are we only allowed to speak for 3 minutes, or are we allowed to have an open dialogue at the realignment committee meeting? I don't know the rules on that.
Can I address that? So,
Anderson.
Mr. Whipperman, that's up to whoever's chairing the realignment committee. I mean, if we have an open discussion with the public, as you know, at these meetings, that can turn into much more than just public comment. Public comment is the 3-minute limitation. Members of the public can be invited to speak on issues beyond public comment when the agenda item's up. So that'll be up to.
I get it, Paul. I'm just simply saying that if they want us to give them a proposal, like 3 minutes is going to be a hard time to get a proposal done if they're looking for.
And that's why I'm saying, you know, most likely to have a full discussion, I would think that would be opened up.
Copy. Thank you.
Who's that calling?
Okay, Rayanne, can you mute your speaker, please? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, for us to close this right now, it's apparently we have the individual that is in the waiting room to speak, so we will do that and then we will continue.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Ms. Sloan. Mr. Morocco, I believe you have joined us, the athletic director and football coach at Liberty High School. Are you here, sir?
Yes, I am. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. You've got 3 minutes whenever you'd like to start, sir, for public comment.
All right. Thanks for having me on. I want to say thanks to Tim and the realignment committee for all the hard work you guys have tried to do. it's frustrating as coaches because we put a proposal together that I think would have addressed all these issues or a lot of these issues. You know, would have created 6 state championships. That's what I'm hearing the principals wanted. Our biggest contention was, you know, a system that can be in place that determines the open at the end of the season, right? And however you determine that with the Harbin system, the max preps, the rubric, whatever system you want to create, a committee, it doesn't matter to us. The top tier teams should go to the open. And again, if we're being honest, the open is really there because of Bishop Gorman, right? Like you don't want to feel like, you know, you're putting a group of 16 teams in a playoff structure against Gorman and nobody has a chance to win, or 8 teams. So, let's just put 4 teams and have 3 teams be in that division with them. But that's fine. We're willing to do that for what's best for everybody, so that some of the lower, I don't want to say lower like in a bad way, but you know, some of the teams on the bottom end could feel like they have a chance to win a division title or a state title, and let everybody else play for a 5A. Have a bigger 5A classification with the open at the end. That's what we asked for. I think where we kind of made the mistake with this realignment process, and I've talked to Tim about this. I understand that he wanted to talk about playoffs, because if he would have just presented divisions and league classifications, then it would have got to the board and then everybody would have asked, well, how do we do the playoffs from here? But I think it needs to be hand in hand. You can solve problems by putting certain teams in divisions where they get to at least play for a division championship and feel like their season was a success. And whether or not they make the playoffs or not, maybe they didn't have a strong enough schedule where they don't get to make the playoffs. But my suggestion would be to look at our proposal, put it out there, and also with the realignment committee, actually like get in a room and discuss plans and like draw stuff on a whiteboard and like, let's see how things look, instead of being a committee that's like, hey, give us a proposal, then we'll vote yes or no on the proposal. There should be some dialect in there, like like Mr. Anthiam said, where the committee works together to come up with a plan. That's it. I only got 3 minutes, so I'll stop there.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. All right, we've closed that item. We're gonna go to number 11, public comment. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the board about any matter not on the agenda. Items raised during the portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedure of the open meeting law has been complied with. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that the said person please complete a yellow public comment card and submit it to the president before the opening of this item. At least 3 minutes per person and 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a particular group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the board as a whole. Comments that are determined to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. Does anyone have anybody that would like to make a public comment?
From the office down here, there's only one public comment that needs to be made, and it's on my behalf to Ms. Brockett. I apologize for having not introduced you at the start of the meeting. Ms. Brockett is joining us. She is taking the spot on our board of control, and I got the paperwork yesterday, and I should have introduced you. Christina, please accept my apologies. After 3 hours and 53 minutes, this should have occurred 3 hours and 52 minutes ago. Welcome to the board on behalf of the NIAA.
All right, thank you. All right, so with that.